All right, welcome back to the Gill Athletics Connections Podcast, man. I'm so glad you guys are joining us. It's a little bit of a milestone, right? We just started our sixth season, which again, going back to January of 2020 when we first started this, I'm not sure I could envision 6 seasons going into our sixth year of doing this, but I can tell you that we're having an absolute blast. Each and every guest is obviously extremely special and a lot of fun to get to know them and share their journey with you, our listener, but also your feedback, on the ratings and reviews that you guys do on Apple Podcast, the emails, the DMs on Twitter. I just get so much positive feedback. In fact, have not received, and this seems maybe in today's era, but overall just seems like it's not even possible, zero negativity. I'm just so blessed and honored that, Gill Athletics allows me to do this for you guys. And for me, I get to enjoy this as well. And so just excited and grateful that you guys would be here for season 6. We're going to continue bringing you amazing people that choose to be track coaches. And we got one today. So let's get started here. Help me welcome, he's the head cross country coach. I'm going to call him the former head coach of track and field. He's now the assistant. We're going to find out why that plays into a story. Mayde Creek down in beautiful Katy, Texas. If you haven't been down there, it's gorgeous. I love that area near Houston. It's a really special place. Help me welcome the wise, the wonderful Mr. Shawn Siemers. Shawn, how are you, sir?
Great. Good morning.
Good morning. That's right. With podcast time, you never know. Is someone pressing play at 10
Right.
o'clock at night, 8 in the morning? I don't know, man. So we'll just say a good morning for us as we record here today. Shawn, man, thanks for being here. It's not lost on me that, as a former coach myself, how busy coaches are. I always feel a little bit more that our high school coaches who are teachers are a little bit more busier. I was a college coach, so I know, how there's some free time built in, if you will, there. Our teachers, man, as a husband of someone who long-term subs, how unbelievably busy life is just only being a teacher. So you being a teacher and a coach, man, I'm grateful for your time and really appreciate you being with us today, man.
Yeah, thank you. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Absolutely. Me too. We've got some built-in topics we're going to make sure we talk about here today. This is going to be, not knowing the whole story. As many of you know, I don't do a lot of research on our guest. That allows me to just kind of stay curious and ask the questions that I think you guys are thinking about too as we tell the story. But there are some things in Shawn's story that drew me to him that I'm interested in learning about personally. And so I think that'll, make for a pretty good story and a good experience for you that chose to press play today. So Shawn, let's get started with you.
Yeah.
Assuming you were an athlete, somewhere track had to start for you. Where does track begin for you in your life?
I am kind of an outlier. Track didn't start for me until I started coaching.
Hmm.
I actually, growing up, I grew up in upstate New York, and my main sport growing up was hockey.
Okay.
And so I played hockey, I played soccer, I played lacrosse, um, which only one of them is down here in Texas. Anyways, yeah, I played that. I played hockey. I was going to go play hockey in college, but my mom was diagnosed with cancer, and we thought it was going to be terminal. And at the time, we had moved to Texas by that point, and it just didn't make sense financially for me to go up to New York again to go play hockey. So I stayed down here. I went to Southwest Texas and graduated from there. And then I actually went into the business world, and I was in the software business for about 17 years before I transitioned over to teaching and then coaching as well.
Well,
And
let's
so the way I got into track is that I was a
Well,
marathoner
hold
before
on
that.
there. Hold on
Yeah,
there. First of all, you already told me how
sure.
crazy you are right there. You're a marathoner. That's just ridiculous. Let's go back to high school, realizing that you
Sure.
don't have track experience, and that's fine. I hate to strip away outlier, but as we've
Yeah.
learned, we're nearing 300 episodes here. There is no one path. There is no majority path.
Right.
We've had so many. It's been really enlightening. We've had so many coaches, high level coaches like yourself that didn't do track or didn't do track until college or something like
Right.
that. So that's not necessarily the most uncommon thing. But as you were growing up in New York with hockey and lacrosse, and you moved to Texas, where was track in your purview. And what I mean by that, you didn't do track, but did you
Right.
always watch the Olympic track and field? That seems to be the
Right.
most, persistent.
Yeah.
Did you, I mean, I hate to say, did you know about track? Because, it's hard not to at least know about
Right.
track, but where was track in your life at all, as far as even being nation about it?
It would have been watching the Olympics on
Yeah.
TV.
Okay.
I mean, this is back before cable when I was young, because I'm an old guy. And so, what was it? World Championships,
Yeah.
Olympics, just the highlight type events. I honestly, I don't remember that my high school in New York even had a track team. I know we did not have one in junior high.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't remember us even having a track on the campus
Hmm.
at all. So, for me, it was a sport that I wondered how people got into it, because obviously they're in the Olympics,
Hmm.
but I didn't really see it a whole lot
Yeah.
in the area that I grew up in.
Yeah. So it's another sport, of it. It exists, but it's
Right.
not one that necessarily interests you. I mean, hockey, it's so funny. You're the exact opposite. I grew up in Florida and Alabama. Hockey wasn't even in my
Yeah.
vocabulary when I talked about sports,
Right.
because it just didn't exist. And then I moved
Right.
to Chicago, Champaign area, and married a Chicago woman, and their family their Blackhawks fan. I mean,
Right. They're Blackhawks fans.
now I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, there's hockey. That's right. Yeah, that's right. Good.
Right.
So you go to Southwest Texas, now Texas State, right? That's the same
Right.
one, but
Texas State
you're a
now. Yes.
Bobcat. Yeah. What did you go to school? What was the vision as you were going into school to become? Were you obviously
Um,
not a teacher, but what did you
yeah.
think about?
No, so I wanted to, my original goal was I wanted to go and I wanted to be a teacher and be a coach.
Oh,
But I let other people talk me out of it.
sure.
And I ended up getting a business degree. I had a double major in finance and economics
So what?
and took
So
that path.
you're kind of, I'm gonna call it your passion. You wanted to become teacher
Yeah,
coach. Isn't that amazing how it actually circles back around
right.
and worked
Isn't
out?
it?
What did you want to coach though? Was it hockey?
Yes, I wanted to coach hockey.
Oh,
Yes.
wow. Yeah.
I wanted to go back up north and I wanted to coach hockey. That
Yeah.
was that was the dream for
Huh.
me.
Oh, that's so cool. Well, that's cool. I like that. All right. So you go through, you get business and finance, and then you went
Mhm.
into the business world, you said?
I went into the business world. I ended up in the software world. I worked
Hmm.
for an accounting software company who said like, "Hey, we don't." I knew nothing about computers. They said, "That's great. We don't need you to know about computers. We need you to know accounting, and we'll teach you the computer side of it." And from there, I went in. I had a buddy of mine that we'd go play basketball after work, and he was a programmer. And I saw him just typing in this just looked like nonsense, and he'd click a button, all of a sudden a program was there, and I was like, "Whoa, what is that?"
Mhm.
And so from there, I self-taught myself how to program, and
What
I ended
what
up.
what language were you using?
Back then, it was C. First one I learned was C and C++,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
and
Yeah.
then I eventually, when I left software, I worked for a company called Rational that's now owned by IBM, and what we did is we built software for people who build software. So we were a very nerdy company.
I
And
was a computer science major for a short time,
okay,
and we studied C++. That's why.
yeah,
And
okay.
it's funny how it all develops, because I guess now C++ is, which I guess has gone through a lot of iterations. But that's not even like the chosen language really anymore. Like people are
No, I would say right now it's sort of like
Python.
Latin. It's kind
Yeah.
of like Latin, where if you know C++, you know
Oh,
everything else derives from it.
yeah.
Because then it went to be right now it depends. It's kind of Java,
Yep.
Python
Yep.
are sort of the splits, and then you end up with other JavaScript and other things that are out there now.
I appreciate you saying it's kind of like Latin, because I always tell people the reason why I didn't continue down that path of programming languages is C++. We learned basic first and then C++,
Mhm.
and it was like math. And we've already probably will
Yeah,
get into it again. You already know my feelings on math,
yeah,
but it was like math and a foreign language together. That's how I
that's a good way to
explain.
put it.
Yeah, that's
Uh-huh.
how I explain programming to people,
Yeah,
and that just did not click for me. So
yeah,
you kind of validate me a little bit when you say, yeah, it's like Latin. It's like, oh, okay. See, I was kind of right with this
yeah.
language math thing.
Exactly right. It is.
Okay, so you're doing that. You're making programs for people who program, which yeah,
Right.
that's another level of nerddom. I appreciate you saying that. I
Yes, it
love
is.
that.
Yeah. And anyways, from that point, I was in my late 30s and mid 30s, late 30s, and I had risen to a point where I was very well off. I was making a lot of money that kind of had achieved the dream that everybody wanted, and I realized it was the wrong dream. It wasn't what I wanted to be doing. The things that were the motivators for the company, making money, you know, shareholder earnings, all that. Just I didn't care. What I really liked doing was on my Sundays I would teach Sunday school in the youth group at our church, and I really liked working with the teenagers and teaching. And I always had that in the back of my head, like,
Yeah.
oh, you made the wrong turn. You should have stuck with teaching and coaching. And by that time, my kids were old enough doing youth sports, and
Mhm.
I was coaching my son's hockey team. And I was like, God, this is what I'm made to do. And I just decided that's what I'm going to do. And I literally quit and um, took a massive pay cut and moved over to doing what I'm doing right now and couldn't be happier.
So interestingly, when we're recording this, we are the episode for the week. So we're actually recording this in Thanksgiving week of 2024. You're listening to this in 2025. This week is a panel of three former college track coaches who are now coaching high school. And
Okay.
because one of the things I really enjoy doing with the podcast is what I call myth busting. Like, oh,
Um,
you're not a air quotes here real coach unless you coach college or all this other
right.
kind of BS stuff. So I kind of wanted to show, and like you can't make it in coaching if you don't coach college and all this kind of stuff. So I wanted to show here's three, they were highly successful head coach of Division
Yeah.
One, Texas A&M, Mississippi State. These were air quotes again, big time coaches who decided to move to the high school level. So we wanted to explore
Yeah.
why. And one of the questions I asked them was, well, how do you even, if you don't have an education degree, how do you even coach high school? If you want to go,
Right.
I know there's coaches. I was one of those coaches who coached high school who didn't teach in the high school. I was,
Sure.
a outsider or whatever. How did you, with a not only a business finance degree type area, but now years removed from that education,
Right.
what did you have to do to become a teacher?
So the way I came in was I kind of came in through the back door.
Mhm.
So in my job, I was called a product manager, which was a blend of, you know, designing the software, but also doing marketing involved. And so what I was able to do was come in through an alternative certification program, and I was able to teach marketing education because
Mhm.
the one requirement for that certification is that you have to have at least 2 years of real world experience. If you don't have that, you can't get it. So um, I was living in West Texas at the time, and Odessa Permian had an opening for marketing education and doing the co-op program where the kids would come to school for the first part of the day and then go work other places, and I would go visit the workplaces and help the kids find jobs and um, all of that. And so that's how I came in. And I would do an alternative certification class every Tuesday and Thursday evening. I would
Okay.
go to classes, and I did that for 2 years. Then took my PPR exam, and as soon as and my marketing certification.
What's PPR?
Oh, PPR, that's the I don't know what it stands for, but that's the generic teacher testing
Okay,
certification that everybody takes.
got it.
And then after that, you certify in your discipline
Math
that
or
you're going to work in.
English or yeah, okay.
Right, exactly.
Where does you mentioned earlier, and I'd cut you off. So are you running marathons at this point? Where does that come in, and
I
how
was,
and
yes.
how does that come into play? This is just crazy.
Okay. So the way marathons came into play for me is I played hockey till I was about 34 years old.
Oh, wow. Oh,
Um,
really? Oh, so you
and
kept at that
yeah,
passion. Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
just kept at it. I love it.
Even when you lived in Texas, because I feel like the opportunities would be much slimmer there.
Yes, I did. Actually, I lived in Dallas at the time. And
Hmm.
so, if you know anything about Dallas, once the Stars moved into town,
Sure.
there were more rinks in Dallas than I
Yeah.
had anywhere else.
Yeah.
I also spent some time in Seattle, I was in
Hmm.
Seattle for 2.5 years, and I played while I was up there. So I was fortunate when I was an adult. I actually had more ice opportunities than I did growing up when I was in New York, thanks to the Stars.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but I finally quit because I have both of my shoulders. I have rotator cuff tears, and it got to the point where I would play a game, and for 36 hours afterwards, I couldn't lift my arms up. And I finally was like, at some point, you gotta just hang them up. And so I quit playing, and for about a year, I tried to do all the like the the rec league softball.
Hmm. Hmm.
Tried to do basketball, which I'm terrible at. Yeah, and I just nothing was like challenging enough to engage me because hockey's hard, so you have to be engaged to
My
play
my
it.
my brother-in-law, grew up in Chicago,
Uh,
did not play, high school rec league hockey, but after he graduated college, started playing in rec league, and now
oh, good for him.
and that's been, I mean, gosh, he's got to be 38 right now. So
Yeah,
for 14, 15 years now, he has played, and he lives in California now, still
yeah,
play and has found a love for hockey uh,
yeah,
as a post high schooler in college, and
yeah,
loves it, loves it, loves it. Yeah.
yeah. It's an amazing sport. It's
Yeah.
challenging. But so what happened to me is I need something that's hard, that's going to keep me engaged. And literally, my whole entire decision process happened like this. I was in Barnes and Noble one night, and I was looking through the sports section,
Hmm.
and I saw a book. It was titled something like "How to Run a Marathon," and I was like, "That sounds hard." I was like, "That's what I'm doing," and
Did
that's
you did you
literally
kn-
it.
did you know what a marathon, what, meaning
Oh, I knew what a
26.2?
marathon
Okay,
was.
because that's
Yeah,
kind
because
of in our public
I can remember
lexicon.
watching. Again, going back to the Olympics,
Mm.
I can remember watching '76 was my first. One of my
Yeah,
first
yeah.
sports memories was
Yeah, yeah.
watching the Olympics back then.
Yeah, yeah.
And so
So you
and
get a
also living in
literal book of how to run
yeah,
marathoning.
yeah, and that's kind of like my way of learning because this way I learned programming is through. I've always self-taught, so I was
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
okay, well, I'm going to learn how to run a marathon, and that was geez, 20 plus years ago now that
Wow.
happened.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
and I'm still going at it. Yeah,
How long after you got that book did you run your first marathon?
I bet it was a year and a half afterwards, and I DNF'd.
I was gonna say, how did it go?
I see.
Is
I
that
think I
right?
got. I had finished. Well, I went into it and my training because I didn't know what I was doing. I went into the marathon. I was really injured. I shouldn't have run. I shouldn't have even started. But being a newbie, I didn't know that you could defer an entry or anything like
Mm,
that. And I
yeah,
was
yeah.
like, well, I've already paid all this money. I'm just going to go as far as I can go. And I think I got 14 miles in or something, and
Oh,
it
wow.
was hurting too bad, and I had to stop.
But that didn't deter you.
No, it got me angry and more focused.
Oh.
And then I was thinking like, okay, what do I did some, I've got to change something here. This is the message to me that I got to change something. And at that point, I had just moved to Katy. So
Mm.
this is about 17 years ago now. And
Okay.
I
So
found,
so so Odessa starts the teaching career.
right.
You don't coach track.
No, I didn't coach anything in Odessa because
Got it.
I wasn't fully certified yet.
Yep. And then so from there you moved to Katy.
I moved to Katy,
Got
yes.
it. Okay, keep going.
And I found a running group, Katy Fit,
Hmm.
with that one of my fraternity brothers who I hooked up with again. I hadn't seen for 15 years, and he had totally transformed. He had gone from sort of a chubby guy to, I mean, he was chiseled. He looked like your prototypical runner, and it's like, whoa, what did you do? And he introduced me, and through there, I got some. That was actually my first exposure to training. That
Mm.
there's a way to do this. You don't just go out and go run
Right,
because that's
right,
what I was
right.
thinking before. I was just like, I'm going to go out and
Yeah,
I
just
go
run.
run.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's just what's a pace? We just go. You know?
Many of bad stories have started with what's a pace?
Yeah, we just start and we hopefully finish when we're supposed to. You know?
I love it. So, you kept going. What was the first successful? And by
Oh,
successful for marathon means you finished in my book. So what did you finish the
right,
next one?
right. So I went from, well, my second one that I did, I learned that you don't run marathons in May in Texas.
Oh,
I
sure.
ran one in, yeah, I learned that the hard way. And I think my first finishing time was 4 hours, 44 minutes. Um, so wasn't super great. I remember when I came in, they were already taking things down because it was kind of a small marathon. I was way in the back. And anyways, my first marathon after getting training, I actually ran 3:59. I broke 4 hours
Ooh.
and felt semi decent. I didn't feel like I was dying like I was the first one. And that was when I realized that, training works. And I was exposed to a lot of very successful runners who had qualified for Boston multiple times. And it's the first time when you start to integrate with the community and you learn that there's a number of paths to get to where you want to go, but they all share common,
Mm.
you know, I guess, what would you say,
Mhm.
foundational pieces to make it work. And then from there, I just started going, you know, getting better and better
Did
from that point.
you seem like the kind of guy that would set goals? So did you start when you first broke four? Was it then goals of like, okay, well, I want to break, I'll make up a number 330. That may have been too much, but 330, or I want to qualify for Boston. That's a big marathon thing.
Yeah.
Was there, or did you
Yeah.
start? And did you, and was there ever a goal? Because these, as much as I like to make fun of marathoners, and I make fun out of it as out of complete jealousy, by the
Mm-hmm.
way, that I just can't do it. Did you ever start looking, or have you done? Because this is real crazy talk. These ultra marathons, these 50 miler, 50Ks, 100 milers,
Yeah.
things like that.
No, those people are insane. I have never I've never I think I might like to do a 50 miler one day just to see what it's like. But the people doing the 100 milers, I have friends that do that, and I'm like, there's nothing here. It seems like it's fun to me.
See,
It's just
all of
insanity.
this sounds like talking to someone who has an addiction to drugs. And you're already on one bad drug, the marathon.
Yeah,
And then what did you say? I'd like to sample, I'd like to just
yeah,
try the 50 miler. And that's that meth talking to you. And then you get
yeah.
hooked on
Right,
meth. And next
exactly.
thing you know,
Yeah,
you got to
yeah,
go to fentanyl and go to the 100 mile. That's
yeah.
just all, it's all sounds like bad. So
Yeah.
where you're in Katy,
Hmm.
you're running marathons, you're starting to understand and learn that there's training
Right.
for that event. Where does coaching, where does teaching, where are we at in that area?
Okay. So yeah, good question. So where that started was when I came here to Katy. I originally started at Morton Ranch High School. So when I came in for the interview, because I had just gotten my math certification. As soon as I achieved my PPR, the generic certification, you can then go take whatever subject matter test you want to take. And so the plan all along for me was to do math because that had always been my favorite subject.
Yeah, I was gonna say why math? Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, that was my thing.
Is
I
that
hated
right?
English. I hated English and anything to do with writing, and I loved math and anything to
Hmm.
do with numbers and problem solving.
Okay,
So
okay.
I always wanted to do math, and I had that certification, and I came in and I said, okay, hey, I want to coach too. I said, I don't know what I can do here. I told them, my experiences with my sports that I did, and they actually had an opening for an assistant tennis job, and I had never played. I mean, I'd played tennis,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
I didn't know how to serve, or it was like
Yeah.
that. The tennis where you play with friends, where you're like, yeah, I can bounce 3 times and we'll count it, that kind of thing.
Right, right.
And so that's how I started. I was an assistant tennis coach, and but I
So
got my foot in the door.
So you walked into interview for this math job, which my
Hmm.
understanding is pretty highly cut. There's not a lot of math, like math and history. I think, like boy, if you got one of those degrees to teach, there's always a spot for you. There's a ton of English
Right,
teachers and things like that. Not putting those down. I'm just saying there's less people who want to do math teaching versus English
right.
teaching, as an example. But you walk in and say, "Hey, by the way, I also want to coach." But I'm pretty much like a hockey guy, and you don't have hockey. Like
Yeah.
that seemed there's a little bit of I don't know. It seems like it borders on a little bit of audacity, but also a little bit on naivety of like, what do you mean you want to coach? You have not done any of our
Yeah.
sport, but what I like about that, first of all, we talk a lot about with our athletes, but my audience who I work towards is the coaches. I'm the coach of
Hmm.
coaches so that you guys can coach the athletes. Um,
Yeah.
we always talk about our athletes of like, hey, try stuff. Like put yourself out there, take a
Right.
risk, right? And so it's a little bit of like, okay, well, hey, you want to become a coach. You don't know what that actually means. You kind of have an
Right.
idea. Put yourself out there and see if at one area, do you really want to do it? When you get into the muck, sometimes you realize,
Right.
oh, this wasn't what I want to do.
Yeah.
And how do you actually learn how to teach it? So your first one was tennis.
Tennis. Yes.
How
Assistant
did you,
tennis.
and I'm noticing a theme here, but how did you figure out how to coach tennis?
So,
Did you go to the Barnes and Nobles and get the How to Coach Tennis book?
you know what? I did, and I did like a deep dive, and I found some, uh, they were books that were only sold over the internet. Like you couldn't find them in Barnes. Like, yeah, I bought it directly from the author,
Yep, yep.
that were really good, had tons of drills. I mean, I
Ah,
did all kinds of research. I'm an over researcher on everything.
that's part
Um,
of the theme. Yep. Hmm.
and of course I went in with the person who was the head coach, and I told her, look, I haven't done this before, but whatever you show me, like, or you want me to do, like, I will learn it. And I'm really good at explaining. I'm athletic. I can,
Hmm.
I can teach movement and
Right.
patterns. All sports are the same to me. It's just, you have to learn patterns of movement
Yeah.
and when to apply them. And if you comprehend that, it's real easy to take that skill and then translate it across. And I told him like I'm really good with balance. I'm really good with running, with quickness, because those are all things that I've always had translated over. I know how to accelerate off that first step. I know the way you should be positioning your feet so you can move whichever way. I just when you say like we're doing a continental grip, I don't know what that means. So
But
show
you
me.
but you didn't know those things then.
Oh, I knew them then because it's the same thing that you would do in hockey and soccer.
Oh, okay. That's what I
Like
was
that,
trying to
yeah, because
figure out. Okay, okay.
I just translated what I knew from other sports
Got it.
and brought it over. There's a way that you have to hold your body that you don't know which way you're going to go in hockey, which way the
Yeah.
puck is going to go. So
Yeah.
you have to be able to, there's a way to hold yourself on your skates that you can go 360 degrees like
Got
that.
it. Now,
And it's the same with tennis. When the ball coming in, you don't know where it's going to go. So you need to be ready.
in track, we could be accused of we don't like outsiders. We don't think that an S&C coach can come in and work with our make a hurdler faster or whatever.
Yeah,
We can be accused of being a little protective of our
sure.
bubble of being a coach and coaching track and field. How were you treated in because you're an outsider into the tennis world? How
Right.
did was head coach just like rolling his or her eyes, like whatever hockey dude, just
Yeah, there was a lot of
yeah.
because they would all talk about they would play in their leagues afterwards, and
Not you.
I no. In fact, one of the instructions was that I was not allowed to demonstrate serves to the athletes because it was I just didn't know how to do it. My coach was younger, and I think kind of like I worry about what the kids think about me or think about the coach and all that. So I was like, that's fine. You know, I'll do what I need to do. And I mostly work with the lower level kids. I didn't
Mhm.
really work with the varsity level kids
Mhm.
at all. It was the kids who were, happy to be out there and participating.
Mhm.
And A lot of it I just learned and helped develop some kids, and we had some success.
Mhm.
Um, and that was my first taste of coaching. That I was like, okay, I like this because it's a problem to solve. Every kid is
Mhm.
a problem to solve, and you can you can do it. They've all got different like deficiencies or strengths, and you can't just throw a generic thing at them. You've got to work with them individually and find out where they go.
So how long did you do coaching tennis and did that translate directly into track and how did that do or did you go
Yes,
do
it
another
it did
sport?
actually. Yeah, so I did that for a year and a half, and at the time, the guy who was the distance coach, he coached cross and distance at Morton Ranch. He he came up to me in October of my second year. It was right after they had district, and he said, "Hey, I'm leaving at the end of December. I've got an opportunity to do a job in North Carolina, and I'm going to take it. And he said, I'm recommending that you take over for me. He goes, you know more about running than I do. Because he and I would always talk. He'd come in after. That's how I got my introduction. I'd be like, hey, how does your race going?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I was like,
yeah.
tell me about this. And I would call him like the night after a race and go like, talk to me about it. What's going
Yeah.
on? And so, uh, and at that point, everybody knew I'd been, training for marathons. A lot of coaches that asked me about, what would you do for endurance for, the kids here and all that. And so when he left, my principal came to me and he said, hey, you're not coaching tennis anymore. You're going to do cross country and track. And this was December. And yeah, the season starts in January. So
And while
good
you
luck.
while
Yeah.
you may have some experience at this point of truly long distance running the marathon, and maybe there's some translation to cross country that could be debatable, right? Because of
Yeah.
the distances. But now you're going into track, so the distances get cut in
Yeah.
half, if you will, miles and two
Right.
milers. And you have zero. I haven't heard any
Yeah.
track experience
Zero.
besides I watched some Olympics. Okay, this sounds like another problem to solve. What did you do?
Yeah. So, wow, we were really bad. That's one thing we did. We lost a lot the first because I didn't know because I mean, coaching, the 8, 16, and 32, coming from a marathon background. I mean, we ran. I mean,
Hmm.
long runs was where we kind of overlapped
Hmm.
on that, but I didn't really know how to build a miler, and so what I did is again, I went out on Let's Run. I searched, you know, every PDF I could find about,
Hmm.
training 1600. I have boxes like this. I have about 6 boxes full of papers that I downloaded in binders that are the 4-inch binders like
Hmm.
that, full of threads and things like that on Let's Run that I would pull. Like I can remember I pulled all the threads on Renato Canova because I
Hmm.
would always be fascinated with the fact that the way that he would jump in, if you remember, like people would be talking and then he would just pop into the thread
Hmm.
and start talking. And there was something about the way that he described things that was incredibly confusing, but at the same time made sense.
Hmm.
Um, and so I downloaded all those and I basically treated training. What I did is I realized I need to do what I do best, and I need to treat this like a software project. And so in software projects, what happens is we'd come in and we're going to build software for somebody. Like when I was in Seattle, we built software for Boeing. I didn't know the first thing about what the business was that they were doing, and I couldn't really understand why they needed to do it. But I had to build software that did exactly what they wanted, and so I just used my process for doing that, which is I have to get a big picture, just okay, just tell me if I'm on the right planet, basically. And then I go down to the smallest detail and I have to build things up from there.
Hmm.
And so there were coaches that I followed that I looked around that I was like, I really like what they're doing, high school coaches. Like I remember Steve Telanius, who was at Flower Mound Marcus, was a huge influence on me. And, and others. And I would take their training that I could find from their presentations that they would give, and I would just copy it by hand. I was
Hmm.
like, what are we doing here? And I would write down all of my questions that I had on those, and I would go in and just it was just a massive deep dive project for me. Um, and from there, I realized I started to put together my philosophy
Hmm.
of what needed to happen, and I basically came up with the philosophy that training needs to be one cycle all year long, where we focus on the 5K for the summer and the fall months, and then we focus on the 1600 after that. Because then after that, you could spoke off to go whatever
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
32 or 8 or what have you. Um, and in my first year with cross country, we didn't finish last. We finished second to last in
Hmm.
district, and it was a real struggle. My kids were so invested, and I think, boy, I was just like flying blind. making notes, but I would also talk to other coaches. I would always
On that cross
pick their
country,
brains.
on
Uh-huh.
I'm glad you went there because that's where I want to question next too. But
Yeah,
on cross country, did you was there any instinctual, or maybe you got it from your studying of this? Cross country is not won or lost in September or
right.
October. It's June and July. Like if you don't have a
Right.
summer, you don't have a season.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Did
If you
you?
take your summer off as a coach, don't complain where your team
Yeah,
finishes in the
for
bottom. Yeah,
cross, right? Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
yeah, you're not going to make up 2 months worth of what
right.
guys and gals have been doing 4 months worth of building mileage, etc. Did you know that instinctually, like in that first cross country? So you started in December, so you didn't have cross country.
Right.
You go through track season.
Hmm.
June hits, state meets over or whatnot. It's June. Did you have a training program for the summer, or did you start when school
I
started and learned, oh crap, we needed a summer?
I did have one. I didn't realize the importance of the kids coming out in the summer. So I did
Mhm,
have
mhm, mhm,
I had a core group of about eight
mhm.
that showed up every day. Um, but there was about 20, 25 that I would see, once a week, once every
Mhm,
2 weeks.
mhm, mhm.
First time was the, first day of practice. Um, and when the season started, I realized, wow, those kids who ran all summer are
Yeah,
so much better
eight of them
than
are doing a
everybody
lot
else.
better.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. And so I figured that out really quickly.
So yeah, good, good.
And so that the second summer I was able to say like, hey, we all have to be out here.
Perfect. As you are downloading these white papers, reading books, things like
Hmm.
that, and you started alluding into this, how much of peer to peer did you now you're kind of doing peer to peer. You're reading about
Right.
Flower Mound's coaches, what he prescribes, he or she prescribes.
Right.
So that's a peer to peer without that's peer one
Right.
way.
Without directly talking to
Yeah,
them.
yeah.
Right.
Did you call or email other coaches? Did you go to any clinics, anything like that at this
Um,
point?
I I did go to some clinics.
Mhm.
I did reach out to a few coaches and was pretty much given the cold shoulder.
Mhm.
Um,
Oh, see, you allude right into what my next questions are. That's perfect. Keep going. Keep
yeah,
going.
I
Keep going.
was
Yeah.
I realized I had to figure it. I really
You're
felt
you're
alone. Like I
you're
had to
the
figure it out on myself.
you're the
Yeah.
outsider again. Here's
Yeah.
this guy. Sure, you run marathons, buddy, but that ain't coaching track and field and cross country. And
Mm,
you're doing it at a later stage of life. It's one thing if you're a 23-year-old kid that just graduated college, you didn't do
yeah.
track, you got a new teaching job, and you're like, I don't know, I like track, let me coach it. There's gonna be a
Right.
little bit of like, hey man, this is our sport, but you're young, maybe we can teach into it. Here you are as a 30 something, maybe 40 something year old guy who you're a hockey guy.
Yeah.
Maybe some people are accusing you of being the tennis guy because you've done that for the
Yeah.
last
They knew
year.
me as the tennis guy.
Right, right, right.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask, how were you initially received? Because again, we can be accused, right or wrong,
Yeah.
and it's probably wrong, guys, of being very, very exclusatory. What we do as track coaches, that's a high skill,
Yeah.
buddy. Not everybody can do it. That part's true, by the way. As you start calling around or asking for help, and you're at a clinic, right? And there's a lot of other peers. Hey,
Yeah.
how do you do something? How were you initially received? You said kind of cold shoulder a
So
little bit.
yeah, I was kind of cold shouldered. I realized that it reminded me a lot of high school in the
Mm,
sense that
that's
like
not a
because
good thing here.
I moved into a high school when I was at the end of my high school years. I moved to Dallas, and sort of like there's the cool kids and the you know the loser kids by themselves and the in between kids,
And you
and
were the New Yorker for crying out loud.
I was the new kid that
Yeah.
I didn't know anything. I didn't and a lot of them. And as I've gotten to know everybody, I realize that isn't intentional. A lot of it is just people are comfortable with who they know. You
Sure.
realize that a lot of these coaches they ran against each other in high school and they go to these
Mm,
conferences and so they go see their friends. And it wasn't, I end
right.
up learning nobody's trying to shut you out. They're
Good
just
point.
focused on the people that they already know, which makes sense.
Great point. That's right. We have our
Yeah.
own. We are comfortable around the people we know. No
Right.
matter who it is, you're a little bit of an outsider. Yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah. And
less.
it wasn't their job to make me feel welcome. It
Yeah,
was, it's my job to earn my way in is
And,
really was the way I looked at it.
and maybe as I'm kind of thinking this out, maybe it's less of, oh, we're trying to protect our status as track coaches. Actually, maybe it's a whole nother kind of evolutionary scale down where it's more like, oh, we just don't know this guy. I don't even know,
100%.
regardless
That's
of
what I
whether he's
think
a
it is.
track coach. I just don't know
Yeah.
this guy, so he's not in my group. So you
Right.
have to earn into that. That's a great point. I feel
No, that's
better.
100%.
I feel better that that's the reason than like
Yeah.
this exclusionary. You can't come into our club because we're track coaches. Yeah.
No,
Okay.
because I
Good.
found
Good.
it.
Good.
And so the way that I started working my way in is I realized, like, because I'd been in business and you have to,
Mm.
you go to things and you have to talk to people. And one of the things that I started to do to get to build relationships was after meets were over, I would go up to the coaches that won and I would congratulate them. And I would point out some like, well, outstanding, like the way this kid did that. I'd love to hear from you how you do that. And one of the things I found out, like one of my very good friends right now, he told me I was the first coach that ever came up to him and he congratulated him. And
Oh.
he and I have been really close ever since then. We run together, we do all kinds of things. And I made a few good friends that way. Like so one of them was Amy Pitzel when
Mhm.
she was still at Taylor at the time. And she was very giving, like she's willing to share. And so with her, I kind of felt like that was like a lifeline to me. It was like, oh, I've got someone I can talk to. And she was complimentary. I had two kids that uh, were both coming around,
Mhm.
and she was like, wow, you're doing a real, like, they've really improved from last year. You're doing the right thing.
Mhm.
And that was like water in a desert to me, to
Yeah.
hear that from someone else. And really from there, as I started doing that, I started to meet more people because if you're nice and you're authentic to people and you tell them that you really like, they'll reciprocate and talk
Mhm.
back with you.
Mhm.
And so from there, I just started, building up a friend group from there. And then I found that there was one of my good friends at the time and still is Walt Yarrow. And we started at about the same time. He was at Langham Creek
Mhm.
in Sci-Fair. And we had one track season, we had the exact same schedule for like our first 5 meets. And we were joking like, well, here we are again. And we would start talking. And he was a second career coach.
Mhm.
And he was a triathlete and marathoner coming over. And so there was common ground. And then he and I could talk shop.
Mhm.
And then and it just kind of starts from there where you have more people
Right.
that you like to talk with. And now I have all kinds of coaches that we just I love our sport because we share everything
Yeah.
openly.
Isn't it interesting? You said when you're authentic and you're positive, people will I'll say open themselves up to you. Like, okay, maybe you can come
Yeah,
in our group. You know what's interesting? When you said that, I was like, oh, but sometimes we don't believe that. Like we have this like
yeah,
this distrust of positivity. It's like, well, you got to prove that this is actually authentic, that you're not
right,
putting on this fake positive mask, if you will. The opposite's
yeah,
not true. If you are having a bad day and you snap at someone or you're gruff with someone, there's no more proof needed. It's automatic. You're the bad person. We don't give people the grace of like, you know what, maybe they were
right,
just having a bad day. Maybe I should give them another
right,
chance. It was just interesting as you said that. I was like, because I experienced that, and we'll get to this topic probably here pretty soon on Twitter. I'm the like I love to be on Twitter, track Twitter, to be the positive guy because I want to like expel the negatives side of life,
right.
right? So there's so much negativity on Twitter.
Yes,
My choice is I can either add to that, which I don't want to do that. I can just leave. Like I can cut that out. That's a viable option. I can just not be there for all the negativity, or I can be a part of the solution. This is my thought process
yeah,
of battling back the negativity by being over indexed on the positivity. But I know for the first couple of, I don't know, months, years, maybe still to this day, I'm still meeting new people on Twitter, that people think like, what's his angle? Especially since I work for, Gill Athletics and I'm in
right,
sales and things
right,
like, oh, he's doing that for, to try to get
yeah,
to sell me something or whatever, blah, blah, blah.
right,
And so I have to like continue to prove like, oh, certainly I do want you to buy stuff from us. I have a job and I
yeah,
have, hundreds of other teammates here that I'd like to keep them employed as well. So certainly I do want that. However, my passion for coaching is like there, you don't become you don't get on my naughty list because you don't buy from me. Like I don't say, oh, you know what,
Right.
Shawn, yeah, good luck, I guess, but you don't really buy from me, so I don't really care. It's like, oh man, there are plenty of coaches who don't choose products from me that I still love. Like that to me, you're coach first, you're customer second.
Right.
Hope my bosses are okay with that. They've heard me say that enough, so it's all good. Um, but I have to continually prove, like, oh, like the sales pitch is never coming, guys. The next
Right.
positive thing is coming, not the next sales pitch. Anyway,
Right.
so you're at Morton Ranch. How long at Morton Ranch, and where and why do you go to another place?
So I was at Morton Ranch for 9 years.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, so I was there for a long time.
Yeah.
Loved my time. They're fantastic kids, everything. And then from Morton, I got an opportunity to move over to Stratford.
Okay.
Um,
When you
and
when you left Morton,
mhm.
did you consider yourself a track coach now? Like
Yes,
I always ask this of
yes,
like with athletes that go on to become graduate assistants, that go on to become assistants. It's like, when you're even going through grad assistant work, you still have an out. Like you can get your grad
right.
work done and you can be coaching, but when you get your master's degree, you can still go to business, you can still go marketing, whatever.
Yeah,
You don't have to go into track coaching at that point. And so like one of my favorite questions is like, oh, is this now when you decided, yep, there's a fork in the road and I am going this route,
yeah,
which is a track coaching. Are you now, after 9 years, so 8 seasons, I think, because you did tennis,
yeah. Call it like that.
yeah,
Yeah,
so let's call it 8 seasons.
7.5, I guess you'd call it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Are
Yeah.
you like, oh yeah, like is that part of your identity now? Like, oh yeah, I'm
Yes,
track coach Siemers now at this point.
yes, yeah.
Yeah,
I had invested so much time and
right.
had figured it out. Where I'd
Yeah,
had athletes make it to state and cross country.
yeah. Wow.
I had a kid one year in 2015. He won the region, the 16 and 32, and went to state. I
Yeah.
started coaching the 400 because the 400 to me is I know it's a sprint event, but I feel it more of as a hybrid. I kind of feel like that's where
We
endurance and speed come together
are
is the
not going
400.
to get into that argument.
Yeah.
All right, that's how he
No.
feels. We're going to move on. Okay.
Yeah, you can't just go out and run a 400 to be good. I got to have some endurance set. But
Sure, sure, sure.
I'd had a kid that I coached that had made it to state in the
Yeah.
400, and so
No eye
I was
over
gaining traction, I guess you would say.
no eye over at the tennis court. It's like, man, maybe I should go back to coach tennis.
No, no, I don't even know where my tennis racket was at this point in time.
And Morton didn't create a hockey team.
No, there's no hockey team
What
coming,
what
unfortunately.
what
Yeah.
if Morton had? What if they had started a hockey team? Would you have like jumped ship in a heartbeat to go back to?
No,
Is that
no.
right?
Right now, I'm 100%
No, no, not
in.
now.
No, back then I
I'm not
was
talking about now because
100%
I
in.
figured now no would be the
Yeah,
answer. I'm talking about your first 4, 5, 6 years coaching. They're like, hey, Shawn, we know about your hockey background. We're actually starting hockey. We want you to be on staff, but that means you can't coach track.
yeah. No, I'd say after about 2 to 3 years of track and cross
Yeah,
country,
yeah.
I was totally indoctrinated, and
That is what is
that's where
great
I
about our
wanted to be.
sport. I love that.
Yes.
That we took you away from your passion. You grew up a hockey player. Let's be
Yeah.
real here. And we
Yeah.
converted you to the light side of track and field. I love that. That's a
Yeah.
great
I always tell
story.
people hockey is my team sport passion, but um, coaching runners and field athletes, that's just
Love it.
that one to one.
Yeah.
It's just there's nothing like it.
That's so
Um,
cool.
there's nothing like it. So yeah,
That's cool.
it didn't take long for me to convert.
So then you go to Stratford. I'm not familiar with
Yes.
Stratford. Is that in Katy?
So Stratford, it's in Houston.
Okay, Houston.
It's in Spring Branch School
Okay, okay.
District.
Hmm.
And I went there. My good friend Tony Berlin had been at Stratford for, oh boy, a lot of years. He had won a state title there when they were 5A. I want to
Wow.
say in 2012, 13, sometime in the early part of the decade. And he was transitioning over to do, he felt like he had kind of done everything he could do at Stratford and he wanted to move over, but he wanted to see the program continue on. And he was one of those people I became friends with by going up to him and telling him congratulations because he beat me a lot when I started off. And I think he saw that I was authentic and I really wasn't vying for an angle. I just was like, "Oh, that's great. You earned it. Like, congratulations." And so he contacted me and he had recommended me as the head coach. And For me, it was boy, it was hard to leave Morton Ranch.
Mhm.
It was when I had the offer, my wife and I went to Florida. We were going to Disney World for a few days, and I remember that whole trip. I was just yeah. I'd go on one ride. I'm like, I'm staying. I'd come off the ride. I'm like, I'm going. It was one of those things, and yeah, and really, what it came down to was it was a different opportunity. It's a school that had running tradition, like distance running tradition
Mhm.
already. Not a whole lot on the track side, but cross country, they were a staple at the
Mhm.
time. I think his last year there, his girls had won the region at Region 36A. And that whole group was graduating, so it was kind of a rebuild, but it was a rebuild of something that was already good, if that
Mhm.
makes sense.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and I just really, when it comes down to these things, I always do a thing where I do a mental exercise and say, hey, 25 years from now, am I going to regret not taking this opportunity
Mhm.
and learning something? And I was like, yeah, I think so. And so that really was why I left.
Mhm.
It was like I just think for my growth, this is a good opportunity
Doesn't sound
for
like
me.
doesn't sound like that could be very easy. I mean, Morton Ranch is where track coach Siemers was born.
Right. Yeah. And I have really I get very close with my athletes. It's
Mhm.
a I kind of we build a family, not a team. And
Mhm.
so there was a lot of that type of thing. And
Mhm.
one of my coaches that I was friends with, I was talking with, he said, I think he said Gary Dirks told him this of all people, who
Mhm.
we talked about earlier, was
Mhm.
saying, never leave a program because of a kid and never stay at a program because of a kid,
Mhm.
because you're going to have all new kids in
Mhm.
4 years. And and I was like, okay, so if we got rid of if I took all that out, yeah, this is a great opportunity for me.
Mhm.
I'm going to learn. I'm going to become better by doing this.
Our number one most listened to podcast is from Boo Schexnayder. Does that name?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Boo was a mentor of mine when I coached. And one of the things that he said that was really kind of like a gut punch, like, "Oh, Boo, you're not supposed to say that out loud." And he was talking a little bit about egos and things like that, about leaving. And he echoed similar statements about you don't leave or stay for a kid. But his way of saying it was, if you truly are about the kids, like that's your mission. Well, how do you know that when you leave, a coach that's better for them? He did not say a better coach, a coach that is better for them comes in their place. Like maybe you're holding back
yeah.
a better coach for them because you
Right.
won't leave. And it was like, oh, wait a minute. Boo, the
That's
ego.
interesting.
Yeah, the ego tells us that we're the best coach for our
Exactly.
kids. What do you
Right.
mean there's
Right.
someone else out that could be better? It was just
Yes.
interesting statement that I believe makes a lot of sense. And then I love I think what I took from that story that I wish more people in general, but certainly track coaches would think this way is long term versus short term. Your statement of I did this exercise of like 25 years from now, will I regret leaving or not leaving this position here?
Yeah.
That's a long term. Like you kind of put yourself out. You start looking at, well, what is 25 years from now, Shawn? Doing, thinking, acting, feeling based on
Right.
this, again, that split in the road, stay, go. And I wish more coaches, I think a lot of us, and it's easy when we're younger. I mean, you remember your younger self. I remember my younger self. It's easy as a 25-year-old to be caught up in, well, how's this going to help today or literally
Right.
tomorrow, the very next day, tomorrow, whether it's paycheck, whether it's feelings of relationships or really athletes. I've got stud athletes here, et cetera, et cetera. I remember when I was coaching junior college in 2001 season, we didn't have a lot of kids. So all I did all year was recruit. And I ended up signing what I thought was, maybe the number one recruiting class in the nation, regardless,
Hmm.
Division One, it didn't matter, JUCO. And I was talking to a coach at Oregon. I had applied for a job there and didn't get it, but I had another job offer, and I asked that coach, "Hey, what would you do? I've got he knew what I had. I listed off the, 20 just stud, number one or number two in the nation out of high school.
Yeah.
And I was like, what would you do? And he was like, hey, Mike, he goes, if you want to coach Division 1, maybe you need to get back under that rule book. There'll be other kids if you're good enough and worthy enough and recruiting good enough, there'll be other kids like that as well.
Yeah.
And it made me think about long term, like, oh, what is
Yeah.
my long term goal to stay here at this junior college, or is my long term to be in the SEC? That was my long
Yeah.
term goal. And I remember I literally I didn't even hang up the phone. I pressed the receiver, came back up and called the coach at Ball State, Sue Parks, and said, "Hey, I'll take the job. I'll be there Labor Day or whatnot." So, but I
That's
think,
great.
but I think that long. Now, I'm not saying that I didn't make a lot of short term decisions as
Yeah.
well, but I love that part of your story. I think that's a good lesson for people is, what you do today affects tomorrow. Don't let that be in a negative as much as you can.
Right.
Think about that long term, those
Yeah.
long term goals you have, not just professional goals, right? Not just, for mine, it was coaching the SEC, but family goals and
Right.
financial goals. That's the one that kills me the most. All
Yeah.
of our coaches, even down to high schools for sure, need to be paid more. So how do you do that? Well, you've got to sometimes you got to move. I
Yeah.
don't fault coaches that move to a lot of different
Yeah.
institutions as long as they're getting paid
Yeah.
more each way. Okay, Stratford. So how long
Yes.
at Stratford?
So I was at Stratford for 3 years.
Okay.
We had a great run. Cross country was very successful. Yeah, the girls team went to state twice. We had individuals go to state. We had.
How did you? I'm curious. You mentioned Stratford
Mhm.
had a success in cross country.
Right.
You come in. I'm always interested in this when I'll use the descriptor high powered. When an established coach comes in
Yeah.
of an already established program, something tells me the way you not only the way you coach, but how you prescribe workouts is different than what they were used to,
Right. 100%.
and they were used to success off of that. How did you handle that transition? I feel like that could be tricky.
Yeah. So when I came in, so the girls, when I came in, the previous years leading up, the girls team had been phenomenal. I mean, they were just a superpower. And the boys team was, they would get to the regional meet, but they kind of a middle level team at that level. And almost all of those girls, the great girls, left. And it was kind of funny when I came in. All the parents were apologizing to me, going like, "Oh, we're so sorry. We're not going to be any good this year. We lost everybody." And I was like, "I don't know what you're looking at, but we're going to state." And they're like, "Oh no!" And well, there were two girls that had run JV. They had run JV the year before, and I saw them training, and I was like, "Oh no, these girls have like two more levels that they can get to." I mean, we only have five. We're not running a deep team, but we're going to be
Mm.
good. We're not going to win the region, but we're going to be good enough to go top four
Hmm.
and get to state. And we had two freshman girls come in who were pretty good runners, but more important, were very team oriented and very focused and determined individuals. And so it was kind of funny. They were telling me like, "Oh, we're sorry," and I was like, "No, we're going to keep it going." So it was an interesting conversation, and I told them, I said, "And the boys are going to be good too." And parents were like, "Ah, the boys, they're really good." And I was like, "No, we've got one
This
kid here
guy's
that's
so
special."
naive.
Yeah, exactly. But there was a lot of pushback on workouts and how we do things because I'm
Yeah.
very methodical. I always tell people like my training plan is a story. I can explain if you go like October 12th, I can look at my plan and go like, okay, here's why we're doing what we're doing here. It's
Mm.
because we've been here before and we're going here, and this
Mm.
is why we're doing this right now. And they weren't used to that.
Mm.
It was a different approach that
Mhm.
obviously worked because
Mhm.
they've been winning.
Right.
My approach was just different.
Mhm.
And there were some parents that were pushing back and the way I did meets, like I don't try and win every meet.
Mhm.
I don't ask my kids to go all in for me until district when
Mhm.
it counts. Before then, we're rehearsing, kind of like in theater, right? Have dress rehearsals. We got to get
Mm.
we got to get Act One right before we can worry about nailing
Mm,
Act Two,
right.
type of thing. And and we did. I remember at one point we did a training. We did a race. It was actually our home course race, which is probably my mistake for doing it here, but because everybody was watching. But I called it a team run. And what I told everybody needed to do was I realized we were only as good as our number five runner, and she was a freshman, and she had no idea she had to run. I want to say we targeted her for like a 6:30 pace
Mhm.
or something. And she just didn't know how to do that because she would always be, number five runners usually by themselves.
Right.
Right. And the top runners can run with each other. And so what I had everybody on the team do, the four runners before that, everybody ran 6:30 for the first 2 miles.
Hmm.
And then I said at the 2 mile mark, like, go do your thing, or you could stay with her and bring her in. And I told this girl, I said, I just want you to go out at 6:30. I just want you to feel what it's like and prove to
Hmm.
yourself that you can finish like that. And I remember at the 800 mark of the race, we were in so last place. Like we were the favorite to win it. Everybody else was sprinting up, and I've got my whole group of 10 girls just trotting along at a 6:30 pace in the back. And I had parents coming up to me, this is not working, this is not working, and I was like, just be patient. We have 4,200 meters to go, a long way. And by the 1 mile mark, we caught up to the trailers. At the 2 mile mark, we were in the lead, and we ended up winning the meet. We dominated the meet,
Hmm.
and yeah, I think we had girls that went like 1-3-4 or something like that on the total thing. But more importantly, that freshman girl, she ran her 6:30 all the
Hmm.
way through. And actually, my number one girl ran with her the whole way, and she came off like, "That was so fun. I've never done anything like that for a teammate before. This was so
Wow.
great." And after that, the parents came up to me and they were like, "Oh wow, we are sorry we didn't see that." And I was like, "Guys, it's math. Like it pacing doesn't lie. If these other girls could all run 16s, we would know who they were ahead of time."
Right,
You
right.
know, so you can't. You've got to be smart, and it ended up paying off because that number five girl was the one who put us through in the fourth place spot and put
Mm,
us into state. She passed like 20 people in the last 1K
wow.
at the regional meet, and it was because she learned how to pace from
Hmm.
that day, and so.
I'm curious, you didn't grow up professionally as a teacher. You came to that
Mhm.
late and therefore coaching late. How have you learned to deal with parental feedback? That's probably the nicest way I could say
Mhm.
that. Criticism, right?
Yeah.
How have you learned to deal with that as you've, call it second career, learned how to
Yeah.
teach and how to coach?
So I think with me, it came. So the thing is, I'll listen to you, but you're not going to change my mind. I'm convinced that I'm doing it the right way. Like,
Mm,
I'll listen to your concerns, but your concerns carry no weight on what
mm,
I'm going to do because you haven't put in the preparation that I have. If you're someone that is like a fellow coach who comes up to me that I know knows my athletes, like on our coaching staff, and you're like, "Hey, how about this?" I'm like, "I'll listen to that." Um, but live it, I'll just listen to them. I'll let them vent, um, get out what they want to say, and then I'll go, "Okay, well, but this is what we're doing, and here's why." And I'll explain what I'm doing. And I think I learned that when I was in software
mm,
because I was self-taught in software. Um, when I came in software was sort of when the client server world started happening and the internet was starting to be birthed. So there was a lot of programmers that were stuck in the old procedural type languages.
mhm,
And it was very different. And I knew both of them. And since I was self-taught, I created my own unique um, analogies to the real world to say how things worked. And it just made sense to me. And I knew I was right. And so and in business, you get a lot of people pushing back on like, we shouldn't be doing this, but I knew I was right. And so I just learned how to let people vent and and then just ask questions and try and gently steer them along. But at the same time, I know if you know that you've put in the work and you're on the right path, you can't be emotional and let someone bully you off of it.
We know from our own experiences as humans first that sometimes we just like to vent. We want someone to
Right.
hear us out.
Right.
So what I'm hearing you say is, okay, let the parents and I'll say parents, there may be other, the AD, things like that, but let the parents have their speak, like if whether they agree, disagree, I'll hear them out. But I have to trust in my system. So,
Right.
and because I know the system, you don't, by the way. I mean, maybe it's different if someone's parent is Dalton Ritzenheim. Maybe it's like, all right, well, maybe I'll listen to you.
Yeah,
Now,
exactly.
you got
Yeah,
some
I'll talk to
experience.
you. Yes.
But when it's like, all right, Dad, you threw the shot put in high school.
Right.
Now your daughter's running cross country. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm not. I don't care that you read some article at Runner's World.
Yeah.
I hear you. Appreciate that. And maybe you'll explain, like, well, here's why we do that. And
Right.
ultimately, at the end of the day, here's why we're going to continue to do that. So you hear them out. So your advice would be hear them out, but have trust and faith in your preparation,
Yeah,
which means
it
you got
helps
to do
if you
that
know what if
preparation.
you want to know if you've convinced yourself that what you're
Mm-hmm.
doing
Mm-hmm.
through your preparation is the thing to do, you can handle it well. The thing I see people that struggle with it is they don't know why they're doing it. They're
Mm,
doing it because they read something or they're just throwing something at a wall.
yeah.
And then if you get pushed back, it's really hard to defend that.
Yeah, I think yeah, that last part is what you better have prepared though, meaning you better have
Right.
studied. Yeah, I agree with that. Did you do that same? Did you have an instance where when you took over the new job and this one girl was used to the old coach? I'm making up stories here
Mhm.
for
Yeah.
the sake of the question. She was used to doing 30 miles per week, and here you come, you're 100 miles per week. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't really care, to be honest with you. But I'm giving a dramatic,
Yeah,
change
sure.
and so she comes to you and says, "Hey, coach, I'm used to this, and here's why." And you're like, "Okay, I'll hear you out,
Yeah.
but here's my philosophy, and here's why we're gonna do that,
Right.
and we're gonna do it the right way. We're not gonna go from 30 to whatever, blah blah blah." Do
Right.
you have that kind of same philosophy with the athletes that are new to your system? They don't know your system, which
Yeah.
in this example is because you went to a new program. By the way, we have to remember you get new athletes every year. They're called freshmen,
Yeah.
or they're called people who come to our sport late. So you have to kind of continually,
Yeah. You have
um,
to always sell. Yeah.
sell. I was gonna say I don't want to say
Yeah.
defend yourself. You always have to sell to the athlete to get them
Yeah.
to buy in, right? Yeah. Okay.
Right. No, I did. I've had that happen, and in fact, there was an athlete who, um, both the athlete and the parents both pushed back heavily
Mm.
on me, and it ended up that at the end of the track season, there was a girl, she ended up running a PR, and the parents ended up after that becoming some of my biggest proponents for people,
Yeah.
because I was explained why, and I said, look, this is they a lot of it they came to it false. Like people are thinking like, oh my gosh, if my kid does bad in this race, the colleges are gonna, not
Mm.
recruit me. And I was like, look, they're in their season right now. They are not watching.
Huh.
They are not sitting there waiting for this. And I would
Yeah.
explain they're looking for a body of work. If you're
Yeah.
and I would say like times don't matter in cross country. It's where are you finishing in position?
Yeah.
Times in track, yeah, we all know that you're running on a 1600 is a 1600. We don't know that you ran an actual 5K or not.
Right. Yeah. Right.
And but that's why I said position is what matters.
Yeah, that's a great example, what you just described there, though, of sometimes we assume why the other person is doing what they're doing. Meaning, in this example, we're assuming why the parent is upset with us because of blah blah, or
Yeah,
even the kid is upset because they think they should be low mileage versus high, whatever, blah blah blah. Listening to that person, peeling that onion back, peeling one more layer, and it's like, oh, they're actually concerned about college. That's what
right.
this is really about. So now this gives me an
Yeah,
opportunity to educate on that side. I think that's a really good lesson of take a second to breathe, listen to the other person,
yeah,
go a layer deeper to find out what is the root cause of their actions, their upsetness or whatever at that time. That's
yeah. And it's real simple. All you have to do
yeah.
is ask them and say like, hey, why do you think that she needs to run
Hmm. Hmm.
30 miles a week? Why do you think that she had to win this race? And they'll give
Yeah.
you clues. They'll let you know exactly. And then you're
Yeah.
like, okay, the problem isn't my training. The problem is you're stressed out
Yep.
about
Yep.
about college, and you want to run in college, and then
Right.
you're like, okay, this is the re-education thing
Yep.
here.
That's
Let
right.
me show you how this works. And by the way, I have a lot of people that follow me, and I'll say, hey, that's why I tweet things out initially.
Yeah.
I started Twitter initially was,
Yeah.
I'm going to hype your kid up. Like
Yeah.
people are going to know who your kid is.
Makes
So
sense. Makes sense.
yeah,
All right. So 3 years at Stratford. Do we go to
yes,
Mayde Creek after that?
I did. I went to Mayde
Yeah.
Creek from Stratford. Um,
And what year?
then and
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
so this is my third year. I'm in my third year at Mayde Creek
Okay.
right now. So this would have been whatever 3 years ago would have been
And,
was when I came over.
and when we're interviewing college coaches, and I have this experience as a former college coach, when we talk about going from this program to that program, it seems like a pretty duh question in regard to like, oh, so why'd you leave here? Like it's easy,
Hmm.
like it's another job. Like you go from for
Right,
me, for me, I went from Ball State to Mississippi State. Like, oh, I interviewed like because I didn't have family concerns about location. That didn't matter. It
right,
was a job. For teachers, it's a little bit, or for high school coaches, it's a little bit different because you teach. So that's the
right,
actual job that you're interviewing for, the coaching
right,
secondary.
right.
But if I remember right, so we had June Villers on the podcast as well from now at Waxahachie High School
Hmm.
in Texas, and I asked her that same question because I was like, well, how do you? And I think if I remember correctly, I think she also was a math teacher, and her response was like, oh, Mike, I'm a math teacher. There's like
Yeah,
everybody's always looking for me for math teaching. Like
right.
that's
Yeah,
that's the easiest part.
right, right.
So as you're moving, are you do you follow that kind of same thing June would have said? Like when you're looking at Mayde Creek, it's like, oh yeah, you need math like that's quote unquote the easy part of the equation. Like, or I should say
Yeah,
this way,
I
it's
mean,
easier because you're a
it
math
is.
teacher. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, being a math teacher, having an opening is not a problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
Less
there's a lot of,
competition.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
they're always wanting
Yeah. Yeah.
math
Yeah.
teachers, and it helped too. The principal, Gina Cobb, who was the principal at Mayde Creek at that time, I worked with her at Morton Ranch. She had been an
Mm-hmm.
AP, so I had known her
Yep.
for
That always helps no matter what
12 years at that
profession
time.
you're
Yeah,
in. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Mayde Creek now. So,
Okay.
um, you mentioned one of my favorite words, Twitter. When and why did you start on Twitter?
Okay. So I originally started on Twitter probably, I guess it's probably like 2017 or so.
Okay.
And really all that I did with it was to hype my kids up.
Okay.
I had been to a conference or heard a podcast, I heard somewhere that that college coach, like it was transitioning to college coaches were spending time on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
And and one of them said that if you can tag your kids who are doing really well, it's all like a resume for that kid, and it makes it much easier to recruit. And that's sort of where recruiting is going in that way. And they can just drop a DM to the kid, and
Yeah.
not do the old school way, like when you and I were kids, where they had to actually like pick up the phone and call a coach
Yeah.
and get your
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
contact info.
Yeah.
And so
So
that's
initially,
why I started doing it. Was
so
just that.
initially started to help the kids that you have
Right.
go to college for whatever they want to do. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I did that for years. I mean,
Yeah.
my Twitter account, if you look at my timeline, would be super busy in the fall, super busy in the spring, and be dormant
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
rest of the
Yeah.
time.
So there
If
wasn't a
there
lot
was a
of like
meet, I
good.
yeah, I was just hyping up the kids.
Yeah. So
Um,
there wasn't like today we ran a 10 mile. It was all about, hey, Susie
yeah,
ran X, Y, and Z. That's a PR, and Johnny did that. It was that
yeah,
focused.
there
Yeah,
might
that's
be
good.
like something funny that happened. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, there was no plan
Yeah.
or outside of just hyping up the kids. That's all that I was using it
Yeah.
for, and I did that for. Boy, I bet I did that for 6 years, 7 years. I mean, a
Yeah.
long time.
How successful was that?
It was pretty good. I mean, it depended on, you get the waves where you'd have the school following. When I was at Stratford, there was a little bit more of a larger following because social media had grown by that time, and parents were more involved in following than they had been at Morton Ranch. So I got to like 600 people,
Hmm.
700 people, but it was sort of like as soon as the seniors graduated, like 50 of those
Hmm.
people would
Hmm.
peel off, and
Hmm.
they were, and I get 50 new
Hmm.
ones coming in that were freshmen.
And don't dismiss 600 followers, by the way. If
Yeah,
if you said, "Hey, I'm going to be at such and such school to talk about training for the 2 mile, and half of that showed up. 300 people
Yeah.
showed up. You'd be like, holy,
Yeah. You'd
right?
be extremely
So
nervous, right?
it's interesting how we get how social media, we always talk about follower counts and all this kind of stuff, and we
Right.
kind of like, oh, I've only got 600 or I've only got 100, and it's like 100 people are interested in what you say.
Yeah.
That is a
Exactly right.
big. If you showed up anywhere out there's not 100 kids in your classroom at Mayde Creek.
Right.
I'm assuming that's a big number. So 600. Don't
Yes.
poo-poo that. That's a tremendous amount.
Yeah.
I have a lot of respect for that. Did it work in regards to your initial reasoning for being on was to hype up the kids for college coaches and things like that? Did college coaches reach out to you? Did you
Yes.
have those
Yes, it
communications?
worked.
Oh,
It
good,
absolutely worked.
awesome.
I had kids that were doing there's nothing better than a kid that comes running up to you at practice with their phone out. Coach, I got a DM from University of,
Yeah,
fill in the blank,
yeah.
who said that they've been following me on Twitter, and
Hmm.
they want me to fill out, the questionnaire or what
Yeah,
have you. And I'm like, that's awesome. I love,
that's cool.
that's why I would do it. Yeah.
That's cool. I love that
Yeah.
your initial reasoning for being on and that it actually was successful. It'd be, we set these goals and plans that it would have been, a little fall flat if you'd be like, yeah, that's what I did it for. And they're like,
Yeah.
well, did anybody reach out? Not at all. I was like, oh, crap. That didn't
Yeah,
work.
and the
So I
thing
love
that's
that. I'm
fun
glad.
too is, the thing that's great about the coaching community is I think we're all united in wanting to help everybody's kids. And so I would have coaches that were from another school saying, "Hey, this coach was asking about, 1,600, kids that can run the 16. I recommended your boy. I gave him his Twitter
Mm,
thing, and I gave him
that's
yours
cool.
so that you could see." And so there's that synergy that goes on
Yeah,
amongst
I
the
agree with that.
coaching community. That's amazing.
Yeah, I agree with that. We differ especially in today's age of recruiting, college track, of level for the kid, and also at the same time, the desire of the program to develop or not develop. I'm 100% against the word not developing because there's not a single program from the highest. Who just won? BYU just won men's and women's cross country.
Yeah.
They develop kids just like
Right.
Mayde Creek develops kids. It's just a different level where they start from. So
Hmm.
I can't stand that. So anyway,
Yeah.
okay. So that's why you started Twitter. Now, you came onto my radar because you are one, today's world here in 2024, 2025. You're prolific. There doesn't seem to be a downtime now, Shawn. You might rival me for the number of tweets in a week, and that's saying something. But your tone of your tweets is unique to me as well. I love people like, every time I start to say someone's name, it just blanks. I'm at that age, Shawn, where they just
Yeah.
blank.
Oh, I'm the
Uh,
same way. Yeah.
yeah. Oh my gosh. Steve Magnus. Steve
Yes.
Magnus, does I love his tweets. They're almost always uplifting. If they're negative, it's
Hmm.
because he's negative against something that's negative. So
Sure. Yeah.
wait, you're a math guy. Negative and negative is a positive,
Yeah.
right? All right, good. So
He's found the collective enemy and he's going against him.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 So I love like Steve's, and there's other people. There's a couple of great, Adam Kedge out in New
Yes.
Mexico, and those guys that, it's not just positive about their program, which I love that. I love when people shout out other programs and their kids and their staffs. That's awesome. It's another step for me when someone starts shouting out other people or shouting out stuff that would help other people.
Mhm.
When, where, and why did that shift happen for you that you started? Here's maybe the better way of putting it, Shawn. When you started tweeting for a selfish reason. Hold,
Right.
don't get mad at me, but it was to help your
Yeah.
kids.
No.
That's
Right.
selfish. Selfish is not necessarily bad, by the way. Somewhere you turn to where like, oh, my tweets maybe could have impact on other people, meaning
Right.
selfless, right? Where, why, how did that transform for you?
Um, so it happened in June. And I remembered it clearly. Um,
June of this year,
and
24.
June of this year.
Okay,
June of
okay,
this year is when I
okay.
started. Yeah.
Mhm,
So it's been approximately 6 months,
mhm,
5.5 months that I've been doing this. And it tied in with a huge change that happened in my life with a phone call that I got after I'd gone to my dermatologist, where I got a phone call and it said, "Hey, the test results came back and you have cancer." And
Oh.
that is, boy, that is a punch inside of your head. I mean, in a moment like that, all of your values just explode and you see what's left over.
Mm.
It really is. It's one of those things where your life changes in the blink of an eye. And after I'd kind of recovered from that, it took about 24 hours to kind of stagger and, uh, spend time with my wife where we were like, what do we do now? And one of the things I told my wife when I got diagnosed was, I said, one, I'm never going to complain about this. I'm not going to let it own me in any way. I'm not going to let it change who I am or what I do. But I did say, like I could die from this. I mean, that's straight up what's going to happen. And immediately you think of legacy. Um,
Mm.
what do I really stand for? And at that point, like you said, a lot of it was very selfish. Um, yeah, I dumped a lot into my kids, but they were my kids, right? I wanted to win, and I genuinely was excited whenever friends of mine, won something, but they were my friends. There's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of my
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
on
Mm-hmm.
there, and I realized that, one day it just kind of hit me when I was out for a run, and I said, if I'm not here a year from now, did I leave track and cross country in a better place than it was when I found it?
Mm.
And I remember I was running and I stopped when I was running and I just got very emotional. Like I'm kind of getting emotional thinking of it right now. Um, and I was like, no, I haven't. Like everything I've learned, I've hoarded, to make
Mm.
me better. And after some thought, I was like, who I really want to help is who I was 15 years ago when I started off. When
Mm-hmm.
I was that guy that just, I had great intentions. I wanted what was best for my kids. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to turn. I didn't have anybody telling me like, "Hey, what's your feeling right now?" Totally normal. You're
Right.
not a freak for feeling like a
Yeah,
complete and total failure.
that's right.
Um, and when they're like, it's going to take time, and there are resources out there. If you go up to, like, I can remember at one point on a tweet, I think you may have even asked the question saying, like, what would you recommend
Mm.
to a new coach who wanted?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, so like, find a coach that you respect and go up and go like, hey, I love what you're doing. Do you mind if I, like, if you like
Right.
mentor me or if you ask me some questions? I said, I don't know any coach in the world that would say no to that if you
Right.
approach them in the right way.
Yeah.
You might get too much information, you know, you know? And and so that was really that was what changed it for me.
Mm.
And so I started really my idea was I just want to put things out there that I wish I knew back in the day. Um, and yeah, there's so many things like training, building a team, and as you know, as you post, you become more focused on what you're trying to say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it sort of starts off and it's just you're just vomiting
Yep. Yep.
things out there, and then you're like, what am I really doing? And as I've gone through that process, and I've you know narrowed the funnel down
Mm-hmm.
on what I'm really trying to say and contribute. So really, that's my goal when I'm putting it out there. I just want to those coaches who are out there struggling. You don't have to be new. You could have been someone that's been coaching for 20 years and you're just like, why can't I break through
Right.
to,
Yep.
like, I've been to the state meet. Why can't I get back? Or I've never
Mm-hmm.
been, or just
Right.
whatever your goal is. I just want to throw out what I've learned, and I try and share that, my way is not the way. It
Mm-hmm.
is a way. I've found a path that will take me to where I want to go. Um, but there's other coaches you can talk to too who've also found pathways. There's not just one way to get there. And I want to kind of take down that I call it the let's run message board rhetoric, where
Mm-hmm.
anybody goes out there and says anything like, I like to do this. you're going to have four people come on. You're an idiot. You're stupid for doing it. I hate that about our profession. And I want to, be a voice against that.
Okay, a little bit to unpack there. One, you said,
Yeah.
some people's favorite words, let's run. Funny that you would
Yeah.
say that for a guy who, when you said you first got into coaching, one of the first things you said you went to
Yeah.
go learn from was from letsrun.com.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just thought that was funny. Kind of full circle there on
Yeah.
that. Now, I will say, there's very few things in life that I have found to be 100%. One of those is 100% of the coaches I ever asked when I was a coach for help, insight, advice, etc.,
Mhm.
have been extremely positive to answer back.
Yes.
I literally, I can't even say, there's been a couple of coaches, but the majority have helped. I cannot think of a single one that I ever asked that did
Yeah.
not volunteer to help me with my question or my problem at the time. I think there's probably more than two, but two ways of being selfless for our profession. One is being very open. Hey, if anybody ever asks me, tweets me, calls me, emails me, sees me at a clinic and asks me a question, I'm an open book. Of course I'll answer. That's one way, and that's
Yeah.
extremely valuable. That's awesome. And then there is being active on it and saying, hey, I'm going to, no one's asked, I get that, but I know people have these questions. I'm going to
Yeah.
help them by tweeting, volunteering to speak at clinics, et cetera.
Right.
Both of them are extremely valuable. There's not a right or wrong on this one.
Yeah.
Both of them are extremely valuable. I personally wish more coaches who were on the, hey, I'm an open book, come ask me, would be more active because I tend to be on the active side. So I wish they would, but
Sure.
that's not their style, and that's okay. As
Sure.
long as they're being open, they're contributing. So I love that very much. What first of all, Shawn, thank you for being so open and honest about your cancer diagnosis. That's something that I'm very grateful that I have no experience with personally or
Yeah.
in my family. I'm very grateful for that. So I appreciate you being open with that. You talked about, so I can't imagine, like when you talk about that phone call, I've had what I thought were pretty bad phone calls. Yours
Yeah.
takes the cake on that one, my friend, on pretty bad phone calls there.
Yeah.
Uh, again, we've talked a few times today about this, splitting the road. When you get a phone call like that, um,
Hmm.
it would be easier, not just as easy, it would have been easier for you to curl up, insulate. Hey, family, we don't know how long, so screw everything.
Yeah.
Be angry at the world, at God, at
Yeah.
whatever. Or the other side, would be to, okay, well then I don't know how much. By the way, we're all on limited time. By the way, however you
Right.
want to
Right.
define
Yeah. We're
limited.
all on the clock, right? Yeah.
Some of us may get a little bit faster on that limited time, unfortunately. But you don't know how much time. So okay, your immediate thought was, or I shouldn't say immediate. Your thought process ended up with being, okay, what's my legacy going to be? How can I help this sport,
Mhm.
which has helped me late in life, by the way? I love that
Yeah.
part of your story. And you begin, okay, I have an outlet called Twitter. I'm just going to go for it. I love
Yes.
that, man. I mean, I think that's just, again, we've talked about lessons, but I think that's a great lesson for people out there. You have value. And this is why on this podcast, we made a very conscious decision from the get-go. One, we were not going to focus on just Division I coaches. That's where we tend to think, the best coaches are.
Right.
By the way, amazing coaches there. I'm not taking away from those coaches, but
Yeah.
what value they give is not based because they're on a Division I campus. Division II coaches, Division III, high school, middle school, professional, club, everything in between. Your value is the positive impact that you make on young people.
Right.
So we made a very conscious decision there on that. And also we made a conscious decision not to just seek out coaches who've had 10, 50, whatever arbitrary number you want to put out there, years of experience. Now,
Yeah.
certainly those guys and gals who have 10, 15, 20, 25 years of experience have amazing stories, amazing experiences, amazing lessons that we can learn from. But I kind of had an inkling that, that person who is in their first year, we have something to learn from them. Why,
Right.
you're a babe at this thing.
Hmm.
Why did you get into this? What was and maybe somebody who's been doing this for 15 years goes, oh man, I heard that person in their first year and how much enthusiasm and love they had for the sport and
Yeah.
others. And maybe I've lost that, help
Right.
things like that. So we wanted to make sure we were very cognizant about that. And so where I'm getting at with that is that you have value, whether it's your first day of coaching or if it's your last day, you're about to retire, you have value for others. I appreciate that I hate that it had to come from that phone call, to be real frank with you,
Yeah.
but we all have to have something that finally kicks us in the butt,
Yeah.
if you will, to do it. I'm so grateful that you channeled that negative news and energy into something positive, because I've seen your tweets and they're very, like I said, I think Steve Magnus does a great job. I always use him as an example. And there's others out there. Auntie throws something. She's amazing.
Yeah.
Leah, the throws coach, is amazing. There's something of value to give, and your tweets have value. I'm not a track coach at all anymore at all. I have no
Uh,
interest in coaching anymore. I have interest in coaching
right.
coaches, and I read them going, oh man, that's pretty cool. I could see someone needing that or wanting that or desiring
Yeah.
that or learning from that. So I'm just so grateful that instead of taking energy away from the world, you've decided, okay, well, I'm going to put as much energy into the world, specifically our world of track coaching out there. I'm just really grateful that that's a decision that you made.
Yeah. That was really it was my conscious decision that I'm not going to let cancer rob me of, I mean, it might take my life. It's not going to rob a minute from me that I have left.
That's right. I love
It's
that.
basically what, you know,
Give
the
us
turn was that I said.
Well, give us an update, because the cool thing is you are here.
Yes.
Yeah, right. So far, we're moving forward. I
Yeah.
love that.
So far it's good.
Would you mind give us a quick update? So this happened in
Yeah.
June, right? You
So
said
this
June.
was
So
in
let's
June.
call it
Yeah. And
6 months ago.
yeah. So they did surgery really quickly on me because when my dermatologist thought it was a cyst that I had growing on my hip, and they sent it in, and then to be checked, and then that's when I got my phone call back,
Ah,
and and then I got recommended to MD Anderson, and I want to say those people, that is the most professional, competent organization
oh, shout
of
out.
anybody I've ever been around, and
Nice.
those people move like you get in and boom, the ball is rolling. And
Nice.
they got me into surgery really quickly because my tumor had grown back. And the form of cancer I had was very aggressive. And so they had to go in and dig it out,
Hmm.
basically.
Hmm.
And then I recovered from surgery for about 5 weeks or so. And then I started radiation, which I just finished about 10 days ago. I had
Yeah.
6 weeks of radiation, 5 days a week.
And
Um,
my understanding, that's really tough.
Yeah, it's one of those things that you go in and it's like getting an X-ray. You don't feel anything when you're getting
Mhm.
radiation, but as you go through, your skin, what it does to your skin is just
Mhm.
crazy. It looks like something from a science fiction movie, like where people like they survive the atomic bomb or they're living, and they got their faces are
Yeah,
melting
yeah,
off.
yeah.
That's literally what my skin on my hip looks like right
Wow.
now. And it had reopened the incision from my surgery. So
Mm.
right now I'm still unable to run because I've got a heel on my hip. But anyways, I go in. I'm not out of the woods yet. I did get to ring the bell, but that just meant that I was done with radiation, which was a
Mhm.
huge
Big,
chapter to
huge.
finish. I do have another procedure tomorrow. There's another spot that I need to check out in my stomach.
Mm.
And then I've got 2 CT scans and 2 doctor's appointments on the radar for right now. And I think after those, that's when they give me like thumbs up or
Mm.
thumbs down. Let's take another lap around
Well,
here. So I'm through with the hardest part, I feel like.
but you have surgery tomorrow.
Yes.
Dude,
Yes.
I talk about how busy people are and, so thankful you give me time. You easily could have said no, right? You know that, okay? You could have said, hey, maybe
It's too much.
December or January might. You had that route,
Hey,
right?
this is in my thing again. I'm not gonna let cancer like stop me from doing what I want to do.
All
So
right. I love that. I want to make sure no one
yeah.
out there thought I'd like browbeat
Yeah.
you into like, no, no, we got to get this in. So, all right, all right, all right.
Yeah.
Well, Shawn, we're praying for you. I know people listening,
Thank you.
those who believe in the power of prayer, are praying for you as well. So really, again, boy, I mean, you talk about being grateful for, having time and you spending it with me, man. That makes it, I'd say even more special, but it does, man. I really do appreciate that. On those, this may be a terrible joke, Shawn. I am so sorry.
Uh,
And I don't edit out anything, so this is gonna make it out there. So if you get mad at me, we're gonna have to work through this live here on the podcast. I'm thankful that it wasn't thumb cancer because that means you can still tweet. Okay, good. All
That's
right, all
pretty
right.
funny.
Yeah, yeah. I literally was thinking about that, and I was like, boy,
I have a
All
dark
right,
sense
all
of
right, all
humor,
right.
so it takes a
Okay,
lot to
all right,
offend
good,
me.
good, 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 good. Okay, good. I was a little nervous about telling that joke, but I made it. Okay, good. So another thing on your tweets
Mhm.
that is super interesting to me because it's interesting. We have a lot of parallels with education with each other, you and I, as far as
Uh-huh.
interest and things like that. You talk a lot, and I don't know. Again, I don't go through your timelines. What your tweets come into my timeline,
Yeah.
so I don't necessarily see like, oh, today he did this and that. He did that. So I don't know if this is recent as well, but you talk a lot about AI, utilizing AI, artificial
Hmm.
intelligence, and GPTs, LLMs, and stuff like that for coaching.
Right.
And we're still, I'm a big, I use GPT almost daily for work here and for the
Hmm.
podcast. Like it writes all my podcast descriptions and things like that.
Right.
Um, it creates all my thumbnails, which people laugh at my thumbnails because I'm like, yeah, like I will tell you, it is AI generated. I don't make any qualms about it. I'm letting it do
Right.
that, and
Right.
and I let it do its mistakes. I have fun with it anyway. But we're still pretty early adopters here in
Right.
2024 doing this. There's a lot of people who we're in the early stages of Google search engine for those who have that experience. Um, tell me more about that. What A, how did you get into it? And B,
Hmm.
how are you using it? Because I also think other coaches could utilize it. And so I
Yeah.
want to kind of like help maybe use this as a help of like, if you've thought about stepping into GPTs, maybe this might help them nudge in a little quicker.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
how did you discover it and how do you use it?
So I discovered it because of, again, my software background. I
Of
still
course, of course.
program. I still keep up with
Do you
learning new
really?
languages, and like as new technology comes in, I want to know how it works.
Wow.
Because I like it, not because I'm trying to do anything in a career, but I'm really fascinated by it. And when ChatGPT first came out, it's been 3 years now, 2 years. It's
Mhm.
hard to somewhere in that area. Um,
Oh, no, no, no. February of not this year, because remember
been 2 years
it
even.
came out like in October, November, and
Yeah,
January, February, and I think February was the month it exploded.
yeah.
And I don't feel like that was 2023. I feel like that was 2024. I could
It
be
may
off.
have been.
My time is all screwed up. Maybe it was 23,
Yeah.
but it's still
So I've
infancy.
I've been using it since it first, like they first rolled it
Hmm.
out. I
Hmm.
follow a bunch of newsletters on the tech industry, and
Hmm.
when it first came out and the hype that was going into it, I
Hmm.
went in and I was like, "What does this thing do?" And
Hmm.
honestly, when I first did it, I was like, "Well, this is pretty underwhelming."
Yeah, same.
Yeah,
Hmm. Hmm.
it's, and I started, and then I read an article somewhere that said, you know, you've got to treat it like it's not as smart as you think it is. It's not
Hmm.
magic. It's like an intern who knows nothing, and you have to give very explicit instructions on what you want, and then they can go dig up all the research that you specifically tell it.
You were right. So I had to Google it. I should have chat GPT'd it. It came out officially the end of November. So we're recording this basically on its 2-year birthday.
Okay.
At the end of November 2022, exploded publicly in February. That's when it was
Yeah, it was
like
like spring. I remember that
people
it went
started talking
everyone
a lot
crazy.
about
Yes.
it. Yeah. Mhm. Okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So I started playing with it, not thinking at all with track and cross country.
Right.
But at one point, I remember like I was reading a book, and I'm just gonna have a conversation with it about this book,
Hmm.
and I ended up having just it was like a fascinating conversation with a really intelligent friend, while you're having
Hmm.
coffee together. And it kind of opened it up for me. And at that time, Claude AI came out as well.
Hmm.
And I started playing with Claude, and I realized it sounds weird to say, but they have different personalities.
Hmm.
The way that they communicate with you and what they know. Claude is a little more eloquent, um, not as rough around the edges. ChatGPT is smarter.
Hmm.
Um, and um, and so I would just go down areas that interested me. I'd be like, hey, tell me about X, Y, and Z. It had nothing to do with coaching, just
Hmm.
side interests for me that I was fascinated by. And And Claude came out with a thing called projects where you could upload files
Mm.
and it would keep them that way. You don't have to keep, like sometimes you have to upload files to it
Mm-hmm.
and it could read it, but then it forgets about it on the next conversation. And Claude created this thing called projects where you could upload just a ton of files
Mm-hmm.
on things. And I was like, that's interesting. And some things I had written, like going back to my grad school work. And I put it in and I started having conversations and like, oh, this is really interesting. Now it's like more informed. And at one point I thought, what would it do if I put my training plan in here?
Oh.
And you always have to be it's not magic. I think the biggest mistake people think is that it's like Terminator and it's coming for our jobs
Yeah.
and it's going to make us obsolete. And it's 100% not going to do that. If you tell it like, hey, build me a training plan, it's going to be the worst,
Yeah.
most generic thing of all time. But I just put in my training plan, I was saying, hey, tell me what you see here. And it gave me like a good description. I was like, okay. And then I said, so I taught it like, here's how I color code my tempo runs, and here's, how you can read through and you could read the progression. Because again, you have to instruct it on everything. It doesn't know
Right.
when you put the sheet in there. So just tell me about my progression. Does it seem good? I'm coaching, you're coaching kids that are 12 to 18.
Mm-hmm.
And it caught there was on one of them it said that this is really good, but the progression it seems to be aggressive going from here to here. And I was like, what do you mean? And we started talking and it caught it and I was like, oh no, I did that on purpose is what I did right there. But I was like, that's interesting that it caught
Right.
that I was being more aggressive than I was in the previous
Mm-hmm.
weeks. And so from there, I just one day it hit me. I said, like, what if this was my assistant coach, my super nerdy assistant
Mm.
coach that just could grind data for me?
Right.
When I said, like, this is how I want you to do, this is what I'm looking for. Here's my data, and I want you to just tell me any patterns that you see.
Mm.
And I started doing that, and there would the thing that like the number one story I always tell people is this year. What it is, I found my number 6 girl on my cross country team this year because of ChatGPT. She was a girl who started running with us. She didn't start till the beginning of the school year, so she was kind of off my radar because in the
Mm-hmm.
summer that's when you're starting to formulate who's going to be on varsity, who's going to
Right.
do whatever, and the kids that come in on the first day, you're just kind of like, well, we're just going to develop you. We'll see what happens during track season because
Right.
you've missed 2.5 months. And this girl was really athletic. And in my head, I'd slaughtered her like, boy, she's going to be something in the 800 come track season. We just got to get her fit because she's
Mm-hmm.
coming over from a no distance background. And so my assistant would always work with the JV kids and write their times down. And I had the varsity kids and the upper level JVs, the ones who are in that gray area and can go back and forth. And we always I write down times for every rep that the kids do, and I have a notebook that I keep that's still everything. I need that data
Mm-hmm.
to look at. And so one day I had it was actually a test day at school, and I was all caught up on my grading and everything. I was like, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm just gonna feed in all of this data that I have, and I'm just gonna say, tell me what you find. Just and I said, like, for every athlete, go through, tell me, and I had color coded it, like give me a green if they're on target, red if there's
Right.
like they're overreaching. And if you see anybody that you think is like trending up, like make them stand out.
Mm-hmm.
And of course they called out some athletes that I'm like, yeah, of course I knew that kid was doing great. But it called this girl out and said like she is really trending up and it projected her 5K time. And I was like, wait, what? Because I'd only had her running 3200s because she was JV. Um,
Mm.
and I was like, why do you say this? And then it gives you the data and says, look, this is her progression right here. She isn't falling off. She's getting stronger. She's, doing her long runs in this time. Like, and I was like, I haven't asked her to like move up because I've missed it because I haven't been working with her. I
Mm-hmm.
haven't. progressed her forward. She's been kind of back burner for me. And so the next day I was like, hey, we're going to have you just kind of like run up with this next group on this next, for the first part. If it's too much, we'll back you off. She's off to the races with him. And it was just she's a very quiet person. So it was a confidence issue. And I was like, wow.
Hmm.
And we moved her up to a race on the last, and I just said, I just want you to go have fun. I'm not putting any pressure on you. Just you be you. And she ran really well.
Hmm.
And I was like, wow, she's my number 6 girl now. And I moved her in at the regional meet, and she was our number 6 girl. And
Hmm.
I would have, I missed it.
Mm-hmm.
Plain and simple. I knew she was on track to be something good, but I was thinking next year
Mm-hmm.
because I was so caught up on what I was seeing,
Right.
I didn't know what I wasn't seeing.
Hmm.
And so that's an example of how it helped me to do that.
Are there ways you can use it to, especially, I don't necessarily say, especially for distance running, but, I know in distance running, because you're dealing with 2 miles on the track and 5K and
Mm-hmm.
10K and cross country, depending on what level you're at, you have a lot of different ways to have variety in your training. There's
Right.
I'm gonna call it everything from quarter mile repeats to mile repeats to ladders and all this stuff. And it's typically based off of a percentage. It's kind of like maybe I'm not a distance coach, so I might be talking out my butt here a little bit here, but there's kind of two percentages, right? There's the percentage of the PR, and you decide if
Mm-hmm.
based on the workout if it's the mile PR, the 5K PR, 2 mile PR, whatever, et cetera.
Right.
But also the percentage of effort that you want. If you're going to do 10 mile repeats, 1 mile repeats, that has to be at 70% effort
Right.
versus if you do 1 mile repeat, that may be at 95 if you're at practice or
Right.
whatever, right? So there's kind of two percentages you're playing with. Is there so you guys, and maybe we get stuck as a distance coach because there's infinite amount of ways to make that variety, but
Right.
because it's infinite, it's like, well, you know what? I know quarter repeats, mile repeats, and 1K repeats or something. Or maybe you don't
Right.
know 1Ks, and you're like, I'd like to do 1Ks, but I don't know how do I convert that? You can. Is there a way to feed all that kind of data into ChatGPT or Claude and ask it, say, hey, if my 6 athletes have PRs of X, Y, and Z, and I want to do 6x1K repeats, what would my 1K target repeats be if I want them to be at 70% or whatnot? Can you?
Yeah, you can. And a lot of that too, like you can do a lot of that stuff with Excel too, but you can get ChatGPT to do that. You just like
Yeah.
for example, I always use their current 1600
Mhm.
as the basis because it's long enough to be long distance. It's short enough that it's not going to
Mhm.
destroy them to do that. And you could easily say, hey, we want to do 1K repeats 70%. Here's everybody on my team.
Mhm.
Here's their thing. Will you quickly print out, say I want to do like 4x1K or 5x1K? Will you print out for me a sheet that says their target time
Yeah.
and leaves blank so I can write
Yeah.
those things in and it'll boom.
Yeah. You
And
can
put it
do
in an
that.
Excel file or a PDF and you can print it right out.
You can have it give you an Excel sheet to download that you don't even have to paste and
Yeah.
copy. You can say, hey, give it to me in Excel
Yeah.
format. It'll give it to you in
Right.
CSV, which is, essentially the
Right.
same thing. So,
Yeah.
what about, can you want to do and again, I'm not a distance coach, Sean, so don't laugh too hard when I say these terms. I want to do a lactate threshold type of workout. Does that still
Mm.
exist? I don't know. Um,
Yeah.
I know I've heard the word lactate, right? Um, uh, can you, GPT, can you give me 3 examples of workouts that would hit this type of modality? And it'll give you examples.
You could do that. It might give it to you kind of generic.
Hmm.
You definitely want to, you don't want it to give you something that someone who is, training for the Olympics and the marathon and is 28 years old, they're working out. So
Hmm.
you've got to give it guidelines. You've
Yeah,
got to
yeah,
say like, okay, I'm doing cross country. We're training for a 5K.
yeah,
These are girls, for example. We've got some of them are first year runners. We got
yeah,
second year runners.
yeah,
Give it as much information as you can,
yeah. That's
and
what I was
then
saying.
do something like what I'll do is a lot of times with my tempo runs, like I would love to do one. I don't like to do anything on the track in cross country because we don't run on the track.
Mm.
I would love to do 1K repeats. I have no idea where I would do 1Ks around where I'm at, but
Hmm.
I do have, like, we have a loop that we can do. We're lucky is a 1 mile loop, but we have another one that is 1.67 miles.
Hmm.
And I'll say, like, and I've done this before where I'm like, hey, I want to do a workout where I'm going at 87% of the mile pace, because that'll put me in my tempo range. But our loop is we're going to do like a 1.64 mile loop within a walk in
Hmm.
between for walk, a 30-second walk. What the heck are my times for 1.64
Hmm.
miles?
Hmm.
And it'll do that for me really quickly instead
Yeah.
of me having to go, like, okay, if I do the math and I do
Yeah.
this and that, it'll give me that. The thing that I think is, I think a lot of coaches know what they want to do. Where I think it's valuable for new coaches is if you feed it your workout and you say, like, this is what I'm doing, tempo run, we're preparing for this event. Um, I'm struggling to explain why we're doing this.
Mm.
Can you give it to me in language that a high school student can understand at like a fifth grade reading level? And it will give you, I mean, dead on exactly why you're doing this workout with the recoveries in there. And the more it knows, the better it is. So if you put in,
Hmm.
like, last week we did this, next week we're planning on doing this. So we're doing this right now. Will you tell me why?
Hmm.
Um, I would do this. And I think that would help a lot of the new coaches out because they know they're supposed to do tempos, but you're always going to have that kid going, Coach, why aren't we
Right.
running faster? Or why aren't we running slower? Why aren't we running longer? And I feel like, experienced coaches can tell, like, have that conversation off the cuff. But I know when I started off, if some kid asked me that, my answer probably would have been something along the lines of, because I said.
Because I told you so. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I got
Exactly.
written down. So I read a book, right?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, that made me think about this. There is USTFCCCA puts out a great quarterly magazine called Techniques. Has articles written by amazing coaches from around the country, and of course, his name escapes me. There's a coach. I think he's at UTEP. I think he's the head coach there. I can't remember his name. He's a throws coach, and he writes
Okay.
these really, like, I wasn't a throws coach, so I don't get into them, but they're smart article. Like, they're articles that I'm like,
Yeah.
man, he's
He
physics.
knows what he's talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And I was always like, man, if I'm a beginning throws coach, I don't know that I could have digested this. Now it
Yeah.
makes me think about, like, oh, I can. And here's the cool thing about this stuff, guys. You can literally just take pictures with your camera of the
Yeah.
pages and load it into GPT and say, hey, so you could do that. If he's got another one of his great articles, 4 or 5 pages long with all his graphs and stuff, you could take pictures of it, put it into GPT and say, hey, I'm a beginning throws coach. Summarize this article as if I'm a fifth grader.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned that, and that's what I think is really interesting about some of these GPTs, and it will quote unquote redo that article for you as like it's trying to talk to you
Mhm.
like a fifth grader, and I think you'd be able to maybe understand it.
Yeah. And then you
Again,
can ask
until
questions of it, going
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah,
okay,
yeah,
you're
yeah,
talking
yeah.
about this. What do
Hmm.
you mean by this right
Yeah,
here?
yeah,
And,
yep,
or can you give me a reference page to a web page that
yep,
will
yep,
demonstrate this technique that he's talking about right here? And
yep,
it gives it to you like that. It's
exactly.
like I say, it's an amazing intern that
Yeah.
will give you everything that you need.
What do you have you had any coaches talk to you, on the course, and they're like, hey, so Shawn, I see these tweets about this AI stuff,
Hmm.
man. I don't want to get into it because I'm afraid of XYZ, or
Yeah.
I don't believe in it because of XYZ. What's been some of the feedback of why coaches haven't at least dipped
Yeah.
their toe into it?
So the thing that's really funny that I've noticed, or different, unusual, is, I'll put things out there about training, just running in general. I'll put up stuff about culture building because I'm a big believer in culture first, and then I'll put up stuff out there about ChatGPT. And on the culture stuff and the training stuff, I'll get tons of likes and comments, like I love it. And on the AI stuff I put out, I may have 1,000 views or 1,000 impressions, but 3 likes. Like
Ah.
nobody, but
Hmm.
I get more DMs about AI than I do anything else,
Hmm.
or phone calls, or coaches coming up to me, like you said, at the meet, going like, hey, I've seen you've been doing it. What is it?
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's it's so new. I don't think we know the questions to even ask. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, if this is interesting, should I be afraid of it?
Mm-hmm.
Should I be excited about it? Um, I don't know enough about it to have an opinion, but I've had more people interact with me personally about AI than everything else combined. But it probably, if you looked at it just based on likes and retweets and
Mm-hmm.
it's far and away people would say that's your least popular. You need to drop that as
Yeah.
a subject. But it actually had the most human interaction as a result of it.
What do you think coaches are afraid of?
I think it's like everything else. It's the unknown.
Hmm.
We all,
Yeah.
if it's unknown, it it's or we think that it's for like techno nerds. It doesn't apply to real life, what we're
Mm-hmm.
doing here. Um, I've also had too, there's been some people that have commented back saying like AI will never replace me. I don't like this. It's not we're gonna replace me. And my response is no, no, no. Like it can't do anything without you. There is no AI out there
Mm-hmm.
that you push the button, you say training plan, click,
Mm-hmm.
and it comes out with a training plan. It's going to be crap. It's going to be one
Mm-hmm.
of those generic ones that you would find on the internet somewhere. But it's very good as it doesn't tire. You know, like when you fatigue and you're analyzing things, or if I teach math and I've got a grade 4 classes worth of tests and I've got a meet coming up and I've got all this, I'll make mistakes. And if I teach chat GPT and I'm still figuring it out to check things for me or like what questions should I ask or
Mm-hmm.
it's caught kids who it's suspected who I taught it what to look for that suspected injuries
Mm-hmm.
and that I went and talked to the kids afterwards and said, hey, what's going on? I've noticed your times are going. I didn't say anything about chat GPT or anything.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they're like, yeah, I've got like, this is bugging me right here. But they're cross country kids, and most cross country kids are going to push through. They're not going to say anything until it flares up to something big. And so that was like, hey, let's go into the trainer. Let's get it looked at. Next time something like that happens, just let me know. It may be nothing, but I just need to know. So
Mm-hmm.
that was, I had two kids that had caught that with
Wow.
that I feel like prevented them from missing significant time because they didn't need to take a few days off and, go through some rehab on there. But it was caught because their times were they were going down in a way that was insignificant to me if I was looking at them.
Mm-hmm.
But when ChatGPT put a percentage on it, I was like, whoa, okay, and this is
Mm-hmm.
happening 4 days in a row.
Mm-hmm.
What's happening that we're tailing off and you weren't tailing off before that? So
Yeah.
it just catches little things like that where you can have those conversations and it makes me better, I feel like, as a coach.
Yeah. If you believe coaching is part science and part art, I don't think how GPT can replace you. It can enhance you.
No,
If you
yeah,
only
100%.
believe, if you only believe coaching track and field is science, then you probably should be concerned that GPT could replace
Right.
you. It's better at it than you are.
Yeah.
What it's not good at, what it's non-existent at, when you use that example of the young lady that moved up to your sixth runner and you went to the practice that one day and were like, hey, I'm gonna have you run up with this group.
Yeah.
I'm imagining, and if it wasn't her, I know I can see this with other individuals. You had to do a little bit of convincing her, like, "Hey, you're ready for this. You'll do
Yes.
fine. I'll be right here. If we need to pull it after 3 reps, we'll pull it after three."
Yeah.
That's what GPT is not doing. That's the art. That's
No.
the
Yeah.
psychology, the leadership of a coach with your athletes. Um, I believe is happening with all of your athletes. That GPT cannot replace you on that. Again, it
Right.
can enhance you on the science, technicality parts of it. And again, if you think that's all track is and that's how you coach, then I do think you could be replaced,
Yeah.
not necessarily by GPT, but by a coach who believes in the art and science part of it. So leave us with this, Shawn, as we start to wrap up here. Um, I think part of why some coaches maybe aren't using it is the same reason why when Yahoo search engine, Netscape, et cetera, came out, people
Hmm.
that didn't flock overnight to everybody and their brother was using search engines or
Right.
even the internet. And it's because it is new. It's I don't know what to do with it. I don't know how to do it. Maybe I
Right.
feel inadequate to use it. So if there's coaches out there that are you not using it, maybe they're curious, they're AI curious. That's a funny word. Um,
There
what
we go. It's a new term right there you
yeah,
just
yeah,
coined.
exactly. Yeah. I don't know if I want to be known as the guy
Yeah.
comes up with that word. What would you recommend? How do you give us a recommendation for a coach to put their toe in the water? What's
Yeah.
something they should go and search or you tell us what's some how to like get started. Someone who hasn't done
Yeah.
it, what would you recommend how to get started?
What I would do is think of a topic that really interests you, that you already pretty knowledgeable about. And I would probably suggest don't go in with coaching to start off with.
Mm-hmm.
Find something, maybe you're a Star Wars fan, or
Mm-hmm.
you're, whatever you want to go into. Um, and just go in and have a conversation and just start off, saying like, hey, I'm really interested in XYZ. Um, this is my viewpoint. What do you think about that? Yeah, just like you're talking to a friend.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because the skill is to learn to not talk to it like you're talking to a computer.
Mm-hmm.
The best, it's you're actually having a conversation with intelligence. That's, it's just artificial. And it's the art, when you can stop thinking of the artificial, it's amazing
Mm-hmm.
what happens. But I would just say, sit down and have a conversation, like a 20-minute conversation. Ask questions that you're really interested in. Um, Ask it to like, hey, you said this. Why do you say this?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you'll start to see the capabilities that are there. And more importantly, you'll develop your skill because really the skill to have is questions. If you go in and say like, hey, will you create a training plan for me?
Mm-hmm.
It's junk. But if you will create a training plan for me for um, this girl who ran this last year, she's this age, she's had this history with this stuff. The more information you have, and then it's like, hey, this is what I'm thinking. Then you have this trade
Right.
off of ideas because you can't let it rob who you are, but it can let you know like where, hey, you're on track with that. That makes sense with what you said. That makes sense. What you're trying to do. Have you thought of this? It'll 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 start to learn you as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then,
That's right.
but I would just yeah, just start with the subjects you already know about that you're not going into it not knowing much about it,
Mm-hmm.
and you'll be amazed at what it can do for you.
Yeah.
Um, and then from there, start playing with it. Like do it as a toy. Um, don't use it as a core part of your planning yet. Just do something little like I did. Like, hey, look at my training plan. What do you think about it?
Mm-hmm.
And just have a conversation with it. Um, and you'll learn how to do it. And just like anything else, it's a skill. It takes time.
Right.
Um, and you're
Yeah,
never finished.
I like that. How can tell us for those who are still on Twitter, it seems like there's an exodus every day of a track coach, and it kills me with that.
Yeah.
But where can people reach out to you on Twitter to maybe ask you a question of AI or training or
Yeah.
Mayde Creek in general?
Sure. So you could look me up by my full name, which is Shawn, Shawn Siemers, and it should bring you up. And my Twitter handle is at Siemers, Siemers underscore XC underscore TF.
Yeah.
And yeah, you could reach out to me there and send me a DM. I'd love to. I've made so many friends on Twitter
Yeah.
across the country that we get together and we'll just talk like you and I are doing right
Yeah.
here and just trade ideas. And it's a
Yeah. You're giving me
great way to
that.
learn from each other.
You're giving me the idea, maybe because I am a believer in GPTs and stuff. Because I know there's other coaches like you out there that are using it. Maybe I need to do for an episode here for the podcast call it a roundtable, if you will, about how people are using AI. Because I think the coaches that aren't using it are missing out on some things that would make their jobs more efficient
Yeah.
That there's some things that you do manually right now that are, a little bit of grind work that you could put in there and it'd be done. I used to, small example here, but when we finished up with a podcast recording, while it's rendering and downloading and converting over to the files I need, I used to go into the podcast app and then from memory of that, hour and a half, 2 hours conversation, write up a podcast description. I'm not a great
Yeah.
writer, but but I do that. And then I learned like, oh, well, when I put the file into YouTube, YouTube automatically transcribes it. So now what I do
Right.
is I go back to my desk, I put this file into YouTube. The next day, YouTube's got the transcript. I paste and copy that transcript into ChatGPT, and I say, hey, write me up a podcast description, and I, use some other
Yeah.
words there to make it a little bit more specific, and it spits it out. I mean, like 20 seconds worth of work, by the
Yeah.
way. Or I should say, it's minutes worth of work for me. 20 seconds for it to do it, and then I paste
Yeah.
and copy into the podcast description, etc.
Yeah.
It just and it's way better. The descriptions are way more about
Yeah.
what we actually talked about than what I'm remembering of like, okay, and
Yeah.
then he went to Stratford. You already said it.
Yeah.
It knows all that stuff, and it just
Right.
writes so much better. So there's just some things out there for coaches that I think could make their job easier and better. And that's
No, I agree. I have two that I've met online, one in Indiana and one in Illinois, and we've been getting together every week and talking about AI, and we're all using it in three completely
yeah, is
different
that right?
directions.
Oh, that's cool.
Like I'm more focused on the actual training, and one is more on like, you know, building the program, doing the admin type stuff
Yeah,
that we all have to do. And
yeah,
it's a fascinating conversation because everybody's interests take them in a different way. And
yeah.
we've been sharing, we share scripts with each other
That's
and
so cool.
and bang ideas off of each other's heads. And
Yeah,
it's going to be something 5 years from now. The people who jump on it
yeah,
now
yeah,
are going to be glad that they did,
yeah.
because it's going to be standard.
Yeah,
Um,
not many people used Google when it first came out, and now it's a
yeah,
verb for crying out loud.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
It'll
it's
be
everywhere.
the similar. In fact, Google's in trouble because of ChatGPT. It's
Exactly.
there's a lot of things that I would have normally Googled, and now I just go into
Yeah,
GPT.
just go straight in. Yeah,
Yeah, it's ready
same.
to do it. Yeah. Sean, my man, thank you so much. So
Yes, thank you.
grateful. Yeah, man, just so grateful for your time. I think your journey. I love, I wish on one hand, selfishly, that you had started coaching right out of college, 22, 23 year old, whatever, because, I just love that profession. But I love how unique your journey is. There's people out there. That means there's 30-year-olds out there right now who are in marketing, advertising, law, whatever, that are about to become really good track and cross country coaches like
There
you.
we go.
Like
That's
that's a
right.
possibility. That's
Yeah.
inside the realm of possibility. And I just think that's really stinking cool for our profession and for the young people that get to have the positive impact off of people like you. And obviously, through the different programs you've had a lot of kids that have, they're better off because you were their coach, man. And I'm just so
Yeah, I hope
grateful
so. That's the
to hear
goal.
that journey. Absolutely. I know so. So you can say you think so. I know so on that one. So Shawn, thank you so much, man. I really do
Thank
appreciate
you.
you and grateful for you, and really thankful and grateful for you guys. Again, we're here in almost at episode 6, season 6. It's still kind of mind blowing. We've got a lot of great coaches coming up. It's going to be awesome. We're going to have a lot of fun. I want to continue to explore topics. Last year to you for listening. We had the coaching panel on college to high school coaching. I've got other ideas out there for specific topics. This AI GPT one is really interesting to me. And since I'm the host, I get to, put those things out there and you choose whether to listen or not. But if you have ideas for things that are involved in our sport, again, there's a lot of stuff changing with NCAA, which affects high school recruiting and things like that. Send them my way. Of course, you can always follow me at Twitter when you're following Coach Siemers here. You can also follow me at Mike Cunningham over on Twitter, and always want to continue to have great and positive conversations over there to help the profession of coaching track and field. So thank you again for being here. Join us next week. We'll do it all over again. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you.